The Thompson family had a reputation to keep. They were rich, well-connected, and always made sure to appear classy. Frances Thompson, the family matriarch, took this very seriously. So when her only son, Bryan, fell in love with me, a regular kindergarten teacher from a small town, she made it clear she wasn't happy. "She seems nice," Frances had said after we first met. But the way she said nice made it sound like an insult. "But honestly, Bryan, what could you possibly have in common with someone so simple?" Bryan stood up for me, of course. He loved that I was down to earth and real, qualities that were rare in the wealthy world he grew up in. But Frances never stopped trying to make me feel like I didn't belong. When Bryan proposed with his grandmother's ring, she made her feelings even clearer. "Congratulations," she said coldly over the phone when Bryan told her the news. "I suppose we'll need to start planning immediately. There's so much, Isabella, we'll need to learn about how things are done in our world." Our world, as if I came from another planet, not just a town 50 miles away. Planning the wedding became a battle. Frances controlled everything, the venue, the food, the flowers, using every decision to remind me I didn't measure up to her standards. I kept telling myself this was about marrying Bryan, not impressing his mother. Then came wedding dress shopping. Frances insisted we go to an exclusive bridal shop in the city, where generations of Thompson women had bought their gowns. She also invited several of her wealthy friends to join us, women who appeared in fancy magazines and charity event photos. "It's tradition," she said when I suggested a smaller group. "These women have known Bryan since he was a child. Their opinion matters." What she really meant was that my opinion didn't. The shop was as intimidating as I expected. Fancy chandeliers, champagne, and wedding dresses displayed like works of art. The owner greeted Frances with air kisses and polite chit-chat. "And this must be the bride," she said, looking me over with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, this is Isabella," Frances replied. "We'll need something that flatters her shape, maybe with sleeves, and nothing too trendy, something classic to elevate her natural simplicity." I bit my tongue as they took my measurements, talking about my body as if I weren't even there. Frances's friends sipped champagne, reminiscing about their own weddings, each one supposedly more glamorous than the last. I tried on 7 dresses. Each time, Frances and her friends exchanged glances, whispered, or made small frowns. I felt exhausted and close to tears. "Perhaps we should continue another day," the shop owner suggested kindly. "Finding the right dress takes time." Just then, my phone rang. It was my mom. "Isabella, honey, I know you're busy with the Thompsons today, but I wanted to let you know that package we talked about arrived. It's even more beautiful than we hoped." Relief flooded through me. "That's wonderful, Mom. I'll stop by later to see it." When I hung up, I noticed Frances watching me closely, suspicion in her eyes. "A package, something for the wedding?" Frances asked, her voice sharp with curiosity. "Just something my mother wanted me to see," I replied vaguely. "Speaking of which, I should probably wrap up here. Thank you for your time and advice." Frances looked offended. "But we haven't found a suitable dress yet, Isabella. This isn't like picking out a dress from a department store. A wedding gown takes time and careful selection." "I understand," I said, using my best kindergarten teacher patience. "And I appreciate everyone's help, but I need some time to think about my choices." 2 weeks later, Frances called an urgent meeting at her house. When Bryan and I arrived, we found her in the sunroom, surrounded by wedding magazines and table decorations. "Isabella," she said without wasting time, "I've heard troubling news. Apparently, you bought a wedding dress without proper consultation from some small-town boutique." I took a deep breath. "I did find my dress, yes." Frances' hand flew to her throat in shock. "But we didn't approve anything. The bridal salon was preparing a new selection for our next appointment." "I appreciate that," I said calmly. "But I already found something I love." Frances forced a smile. "Well, I'm sure it's nice. Perhaps we can have it altered to make it more suitable." "Where did you find this dress?" "My mother found it, actually." Frances exchanged a knowing look with her friend Beatrice, who had apparently been called in for backup. "I see. Well, that explains a lot," Frances said. "I'm sure your mother meant well, but she wouldn't understand the level of quality expected at a Thompson wedding." Bryan, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "Mom, Isabella's dress is beautiful, and ultimately, it's her choice." "Of course," Frances replied, still smiling tightly. I just don't want her to feel out of place standing next to proper society brides. People notice these things. Maybe, Beatrice suggested, pretending to be helpful, we could see the dress, just to see what alterations might be needed. I hesitated, then nodded. Actually, I brought it with me today. I thought you might want to see it. Frances' eyebrows shot up. You brought it? Here. Today. It's in the car. I'll go get it. When I returned with the garment bag, Frances had composed herself, clearly ready to act polite about whatever dress she assumed was a disaster. Bryan squeezed my hand as I unzipped the bag. The dress that emerged was stunning. An ivory silk gown with delicate beadwork along the neckline and a soft, elegant train. Even on the hanger, it was clearly something special. Frances' eyes narrowed. What a shame your family couldn't afford something better, she said, looking at it with fake disappointment. Everyone will know you don't belong in our circle. I stayed quiet as she kept going. It looks like a cheap copy, she said, reaching for the collar. The beadwork is messy, and this silk isn't even real. Then she turned over the label. Her face went pale. This is impossible, she whispered. This can't be real. How could you possibly? It's real, I said softly. A gift from my godmother. Beatrice scoffed. Your godmother? And who exactly is she? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Bryan went to get it and returned moments later with my mother, standing beside a woman Frances clearly recognized instantly. Elena, Frances gasped, standing up. Elena Rissy, what are you doing here? The woman, elegant silver-haired, dressed in simple but flawless linen, smiled. Maggie Thompson, it's been, 30 years? Still terrifying young brides, I see. Some things never change. My mother stepped forward and gently squeezed my shoulders. I believe you've been getting to know my daughter, though maybe not as well as you thought. Frances looked between them, confused. I don't understand. How do you know Elena Rissy? Elena, the Elena Rissy, world-famous designer, laughed lightly. Catherine and I were college roommates. Model? Frances repeated weakly, staring at my mother, the small-town kindergarten teacher she had assumed was ordinary. Just for a few years, my mother said modestly, before I met Isabella's father and decided to move back home. But Elena and I stayed close. She's Isabella's godmother, and when she heard about the wedding, I insisted on designing her dress myself, Elena finished. Catherine was like a sister to me when we were starting out. Her daughter is family. Frances sank into her chair, speechless. Beatrice, meanwhile, was staring at my mother in amazement. You're Catherine Jensen, the face of Rissy's breakthrough '89 collection. I still have those magazine spreads. You vanished from fashion so suddenly. My mother smiled. I found something I love more, being a teacher, raising my family. That life made me happier than the fashion world ever did. Bryan slipped an arm around my waist as we watched his mother try to process everything. So you see, Frances, I said gently, I do appreciate your help with the wedding. But I also have my own resources. And more importantly, I know exactly who I am, even if you misunderstood at first. A heavy silence followed until Elena clapped her hands. Shall we talk about the rest of the wedding? I brought some design ideas for the mother of the groom, something that will look perfect next to Isabella's dress. Maggie, if you're interested. 2 days later, Bryan and I were having dinner at my parents' cozy home. He looked at the framed photos on the walls, magazine covers from my mother's modeling days next to childhood pictures of school plays and soccer games. I've never seen these before, he said, helping my dad grill vegetables in the backyard. Your mom was a big deal. No wonder my mother's acting so differently now. My dad laughed. Catherine has always been impressive. She just never made a big deal about it. Still is, I called from the patio, setting the table with my mom. She smiled. The funny thing is, Frances and I probably would have had things in common if she just asked instead of assuming. We both walked away from high-profile worlds to focus on family. We both value education and community, but she was so busy deciding where I fit that she never really saw me. After what Bryan jokingly called the dress revelation, wedding planning changed. Frances didn't become warm, but she was more respectful. She asked instead of demanded and even accepted my mother's help, especially after realizing my mom's old connections included more than just Elena Rissy. On my wedding day, as my mother helped me into the beautiful dress that had caused all the drama, I thought about how this experience had unexpectedly given me something special. It had connected me to my past and made me even more sure of who I was. You know, my mother said, adjusting my veil, I wore the most expensive gowns in the world. But I never felt as beautiful as I know you will today. Because today, you're marrying for love, not for appearances. As I walked down the aisle toward Bryan, I caught Frances's gaze in the front row. But for once, she wasn't focused on appearances or status. Instead, she had tears in her eyes as she watched her son's face light up. At the reception, Elena gave a toast that summed it all up. To Bryan and Isabella, and to the two families joining today, may you all discover, as I have, that true elegance doesn't come from labels or status, but from kindness, authenticity, and looking beyond first impressions. Francis, surprisingly, clinked glasses with my mother at those words. Later, as Bryan and I danced under the stars, he whispered, "You know what my favorite thing about your dress is?" "What?" I asked, expecting him to mention the beadwork or the fit. That underneath all that designer magic, it's being worn by the same down-to-earth kindergarten teacher I fell in love with. The one who knows exactly who she is, with or without a fancy label. I kissed him, grateful to have someone who had seen me clearly from the very start, something his mother was only now learning to do. 6 months after the wedding, Frances invited my mother and me over for tea. This time, she skipped the fancy drawing room and led us to a sunny patio instead. She seemed different, less formal, almost nervous. "I've been thinking a lot," she admitted. "About first impressions, about how we show ourselves to the world, and what we choose to hide." My mother and I exchanged surprised looks as she went on. "Catherine, when we first met, I assumed things about you based only on what I saw. I never imagined your past, and I judge Isabella the same way." She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "The truth is, before I married into the Thompson family, my background was more like yours than anyone knows. My father owned a hardware store. I worked as a sales clerk to put myself through college." We both stared at her. Frances Thompson, who always acted like she had come from old money, had actually worked her way into high society. "When I met Philip, I wanted to fit into his world. I studied how the right people dressed, spoke, and entertained. I erased my past so completely that even I started to believe I had always belonged." She looked at me. "When Bryan brought you home, Isabella, I wasn't seeing the wonderful person who made my son happy. I was seeing my old self, the part of me I had spent years trying to forget. I was afraid he'd expose the truth I still struggle with." My mother spoke gently. "We all change over time. There's nothing wrong with that." Frances shook her head. The mistake wasn't changing. It was looking down on others for not fitting into the world I forced myself into. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine, something she had never done before. "I hope I can be a better mother-in-law moving forward, and maybe, in time, even a friend." On the way home, my mother and I tried to make sense of what had just happened. "Do you think she really meant all that?" I asked. "Yes," my mother said. "Sometimes people don't see themselves clearly until they see a reflection in someone unexpected. Like a kindergarten teacher wearing an Alessandro Ricci dress," I joked. My mother laughed. "Exactly, but the dress didn't change who you are. It just helped Frances see past her own judgment. And that was the real gift, not the designer gown or social status, but the reminder that our worth isn't tied to a label, whether it's on a dress or a family name." A year later, when I found out I was pregnant, Frances was one of the first people we told. She hugged me tightly, without any of her usual concern for appearances. "This child," she said with teary eyes, "will have the best of both worlds. Thompson determination, Jensen creativity, and parents who know the value of being true to themselves." As we left that evening, Bryan squeezed my hand. "Who would have thought a wedding dress could change so much?" "Not the dress," I said with a smile. "The choice to look beyond it."
Get out of that wheelchair right now, or you're going to die. The urgency in the voice behind me was unmistakable as I desperately gripped the wheelchair's brakes. Tyler's cheerful voice echoed, but my focus was on halting the accelerating wheelchair. We were meant to celebrate our love that day, but instead, anger consumed me more than sadness. In the struggle against the unstoppable wheelchair, frustration reached its peak. Suddenly, the wheelchair jolted, and I was thrown off, consciousness slipping away. The next day, I woke up in a hospital room, with Tyler tearfully beside me on the next bed. Amy, you're okay. I got hit by a car, my leg. Tyler's voice cracked with emotion as he revealed his own injury. He pulled off the blanket, revealing his amputated leg. You're going to help me, right? We're married, he pleaded. I refused. Tyler was dumbfounded, unable to comprehend my rejection. Who's going to help me then? He asked, bewildered. I decided to express my feelings. My name is Amy Moore. I'm a 45-year-old illustrator. I used to be active, participating in national swimming competitions during my student days. But 2 years ago, I fell ill, losing the strength in my left leg. Now I live in a wheelchair. Tyler, you changed after my illness. You started demanding money from my family for accessibility modifications and a helper. When I used my savings for it, you still complained. I can't understand you anymore. Despite his objections, I used my savings and year-end bonus to make our home accessible and hired a housekeeping service. Tyler's constant complaints about the helper's work drove me to the edge. One day, I exploded in anger. Why do you say such rude things? She's doing her job, and you're only finding faults. The world's value was being underestimated, and the notion of paying for housework seemed peculiar to me. Why should we pay for it? Have her do it for free, I argued vehemently. Tyler was momentarily taken aback by my intensity, but his face soon twisted into a smirk. To my disbelief, he uttered something unimaginable. If you insist, then fine, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I'll deduct the same amount we're paying her from her living expenses. What? I felt lightheaded, struggling to grasp Tyler's incomprehensible decision. We'd have been paying the woman in charge around $1,000 a month. Half of that amount came from my own contributions to our living expenses. But now Tyler proposed putting that entire $1,000 into his own pocket instead of the shared household expenses. Our budget was already strained, and if Tyler didn't contribute, I would have to cover the shortfall. In other words, my out-of-pocket contribution would skyrocket from $500 to $1,500, effectively tripling. Holding my temples in frustration, I shot back. If you deduct $1,000, your contribution to the living expenses becomes $500. Where am I supposed to find the extra $1,000? Well, it's your decision, so you should pay for it. You're earning, aren't you? Tyler retorted callously, unfazed by my distress. Unbelievable. It was true that after falling ill, I had bravely ventured into independence and was managing, but my income was only slightly higher than what I earned as a company employee. Another deduction of $1,000 would wipe out my savings entirely. However, Tyler showed no signs of relenting. Fine, but promise me one thing, he said cheerfully, completely indifferent to my anxiety. Make sure you save that $1,000 properly. Got it? With a sinking feeling, I agreed. But beneath the facade of compliance, nothing but anxiety gnawed at my insides. Tyler ceased complaining about the housework agency, but in equal measure, he stopped doing any housework himself. Hey, even though we're hiring the housework agency, we should still handle the daily chores, I implored, hoping for some semblance of shared responsibility. Ha! Was all Tyler replied, dismissing my concerns with an indifferent shrug. What are you talking about? We're paying them, so let them do it, Tyler said dismissively, his attitude growing more distant. He started leaving the house more frequently, and when we did interact, his expressions were filled with disgust. The thought of divorce started to cross my mind. One day, out of the blue, he suggested, "Hey, want to go see the cherry blossoms in the botanical garden?" Cherry blossoms. We had barely spoken for 2 months. His sudden invitation left me bewildered. We'd just been passing by each other lately. I thought it'd be nice to talk while enjoying the beautiful flowers, he said, attempting a smile. Relieved by the prospect of conversation, I agreed hesitantly. As we strolled, he pushed my wheelchair, and we engaged in trivial conversation, which somewhat eased my troubled heart. Maybe our recent discord was because we hadn't been communicating enough. Just as I began to entertain that idea, Tyler dropped a bombshell. You know, I'm out of money. I really need your insurance money soon. What? I barely heard his words as my wheelchair suddenly started descending a slope, pushed forcefully by Tyler. Panicked, I desperately reached for the brakes. You better get out of that wheelchair fast, or you're gonna die. Tyler's cheerful voice echoed from behind, even as I struggled to stop the accelerating wheelchair. Fueled by anger, I pulled the wheelchair's brakes with all my strength. The wheelchair screeched to a halt, but it was too late. The tire had caught on something, and I was thrown from the wheelchair. There was a loud noise, and then darkness swallowed my consciousness. When I woke up the next day, I was in a hospital room. Glancing sideways, I saw Tyler crying on the next bed. After a while, he noticed I was awake and spoke with a fake smile. Amy, you're safe. I was hit by a car, and my leg. His emotions escalated, and he tore off his blanket, revealing his body with only one leg attached. You'll help me, right? We're husband and wife, after all, he implored. I refuse, I replied firmly. Tyler was left speechless, unable to comprehend my refusal. Why would you refuse to help me? He stammered. Why should I take care of someone who pushed me down a hill just to get insurance money? I exclaimed, letting out all the pent-up emotions. I regret trusting you. If apologies could fix everything, we wouldn't need the police. My words drained the color from Tyler's face. I continued, not allowing him to interrupt. Weren't you supposed to be saving $1,000 a month for me? What happened to that? I asked accusingly. I am doing that, he replied, his voice shaky. Oh, really? Then use that money to pay for this hospital stay, I challenged him. Tyler stuttered in a panic, realizing he couldn't fulfill his promise. It became evident why I knew his financial situation. I had been managing our accounts. When our relationship was good, I didn't check his finances, but when he failed to deposit the agreed sum, I took matters into my own hands. I discovered he had been sending the money elsewhere, to a woman. I hired a detective and uncovered Tyler's deceitful web. Not only had he cheated on me, but he had also fathered a child with his affair partner. The money he had been diverting was meant as child support for this 4-year-old girl. It was a shocking revelation. I couldn't help but add another twist to the tale. You've been supporting someone else's child, Tyler. Have you been visiting her? I questioned, enjoying the shock registering on his face. About a month now, I added casually, watching Tyler's jaw drop in disbelief. He had been living a lie, unaware that the child he thought was his own wasn't biologically related to him. What are you talking about? She's my child. Tyler protested, confusion etched across his face. His belief in the situation was so strong that I couldn't help but burst into laughter. You really thought I was the reason we couldn't have kids? I said between fits of laughter, his naive expression fueling my amusement. That's a lie. Tyler's face drained of color. In reality, we've been undergoing infertility treatments for 3 years since our marriage, I revealed, explaining that Tyler was the reason we couldn't conceive. But I kept it from you, following my father-in-law's advice. He feared it would shatter you emotionally. Tyler was left stunned, processing the truth. The reality was far different from the world he had constructed in his mind. In his disbelief, Tyler reached for his smartphone and dialed someone's number, probably his affair partner. Hey, did you have an affair? Is the child not mine? He shouted into the phone. Listening to his heated conversation, I couldn't suppress a chuckle. Did you have an affair too? Tyler accused, his voice growing sharper. But my laughter drowned out his words. The call was abruptly cut off from the other end, leaving Tyler fuming. He tried repeatedly to reconnect, but his attempts were in vain. Frustrated, he muttered about his affair partner's greed, seemingly forgetting my presence. I interrupted his tirade. Sorry to interrupt your heated conversation, Tyler, but we're not done talking. His eyes widened in dread, realizing that the conversation was far from over. Tyler's realization that I was there seemed to jolt him back to reality. I regained control of the conversation with a smile, asking, Do you recall signing the papers when we decided to save the $1,000 you spent? Huh. Tyler's demeanor showed his clear intention to renege on his agreement. I sighed, unsurprised by his attitude. It appeared he had planned to back out from the start. I grabbed my smartphone from the table and showed him a photo. See, it's written here. In case of misuse, divorce, and the entire amount spent up to the discovered month will be paid to the wife, Amy. That wasn't there, Tyler protested, his frustration evident. Oh, but it's properly checked, and there's a signature too, isn't it? It's even notarized, I countered calmly. Tyler's frustration grew, and he appealed to me desperately. Come on, Amy, I was just possessed. Please don't mention divorce. Besides, I can't afford such a large sum. Divorce is too extreme. I can't handle it. The divorce is settled. However, you can pay the spent amount in installments, I replied, my tone unyielding. Seeing my resolve, Tyler tried to portray himself as the victim. He pleaded, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. I sighed and gestured toward the figure lurking at the hospital room entrance. Please come in, Dad. Upon seeing his father-in-law, Tyler shouted, My father-in-law, please listen. This is all a misunderstanding. My father-in-law's face turned crimson, his eyes glaring at Tyler. This marks the end of our relationship, he declared, glaring at Tyler before turning to me with an apology. I'm truly sorry. I won't ask for forgiveness, and it's fine if you don't. Please file a complaint. I'm just glad Amy is safe. Thank you. Tears welled in his eyes, dropping onto my bed. I shot Tyler an accusatory glare, holding him responsible for making my beloved father-in-law endure this ordeal. What? Don't you feel anything seeing this? It's your fault. Always spending money, earning more than me, and your wealthy family is miserly. I don't know why I married you, I whispered, my voice laced with deep resentment. The beautiful memories we shared seemed tarnished, tainted by his actions. Tyler looked taken aback, observing the depths of my loathing. In an attempt to mask my pain, I forced a smile. Well, marrying for money and ending up with repayment. Quite a sad story, isn't it? Shut up. I won't pay, Tyler retorted defiantly. Too bad. Payment is non-negotiable, I stated firmly. My father-in-law, wearing a menacing expression, addressed Tyler. I will be watching you until the payments are completed. Interrupting this tense atmosphere, a middle-aged doctor in a white coat entered. Coming directly to me, he handed over a document, asking, Is there a reason you are not receiving treatment for your leg? Confused, I glanced at Tyler, who was staring at the doctor with a pale face. The room was thick with tension, and the future felt uncertain. The doctor continued speaking, wearing a puzzled expression. If you have surgery on your leg, you'll be able to move again. Didn't you hear that when you were diagnosed before? I didn't hear, I replied, glancing at Tyler, who avoided my gaze. A sense of foreboding washed over me. Tyler, you lied to me, I accused, my voice tinged with betrayal, but he remained non-committal. My father-in-law, furious, berated him again. Turning to the doctor, I asked, I didn't hear the diagnosis directly at the time. Could you please tell me? Yes, Amy, your illness is temporary paralysis caused by a herniated disc, leading to blood flow issues in your spinal cord. With some time and rehabilitation, you'll be able to walk again, the doctor explained gently. Tears welled up in my eyes at his words. I regretted trusting Tyler and not hearing the diagnosis firsthand. My disgust for him, who lied about a matter involving someone's life, deepened. Why, Tyler? What's going on? I demanded, my voice filled with anger and confusion. Tyler stood frozen, his shoulder trembling as he suddenly burst into tears. If Amy is free to roam the world, I'm always left behind. If she's in a wheelchair, she will always stay home and won't have more fun than me, right? Tyler sobbed, revealing his selfish jealousy. So what? Your selfishness forced me to live in a wheelchair for 2 years, knowing I could have had surgery to eliminate the pain and paralysis, yet you kept silent. That's the worst part, I retorted, my voice laced with exhaustion. Tyler hung his head in defeat, unable to respond. I looked at him with cold eyes, my father-in-law and the doctor glaring at him in righteous anger. "May I explain the surgery to you tomorrow?" the doctor asked, trying to bring back some semblance of normalcy. "Yes, please do," I replied, my voice brightening with newfound hope. The doctor's warm smile gave me confidence in a brighter future ahead. "I'll arrange for separate rooms," the doctor stated, but Tyler protested vehemently, refusing to be separated from me. Ignoring him, the doctor informed me, "See you tomorrow," before leaving the room. "Amy, you're not really going to divorce me, right?" Tyler pleaded desperately. A nurse entered, indicating my move to a different room, ensuring Tyler couldn't easily intrude anymore. Tyler resisted fiercely, his loud refusals ignored. The nurse wheeled me away, leaving Tyler screaming behind me. My father-in-law met my eyes and nodded in understanding, while I bowed my head in acknowledgement. That was the last time I saw Tyler. A few months later, divorce papers arrived through my lawyer, marking the end of our tumultuous relationship. Tyler, once disheartened, now lived under my father-in-law's strict supervision. His colleagues, aware of his deceit, turned their backs on him, leaving him to face the consequences of his actions. In the aftermath, I underwent surgery and spent months in the hospital for physical therapy. With my father-in-law's support, I could continue working while in a private room. After being discharged, consistent therapy and regular checkups allowed me to walk with a cane. In my daily routine, I began taking walks around the house. Recently, I exchanged contact information with someone I met during these walks, someone who had helped me when I stumbled. We plan to meet for a meal soon. The exhilarating feeling of a new spring fills me with excitement, and these days, the anticipation of a fresh start is unstoppable. I'm Layla, 37 years old, and I've been married to my husband Jimmy for 13 years. Currently, we live together as a family of 4, including our daughter, Karen, and my mother-in-law. A few years ago, after my father-in-law passed away, we began living with my mother-in-law in her home. Unfortunately, this arrangement was far from peaceful. Shortly after we moved in, she started to pester me about dinner. "Is dinner ready? How long are you planning to make everyone wait?" She'd complain as I was cooking, coming into the kitchen and even tasting the food. "This pot roast has no flavor. It's awful," she'd say. I'd reply, "I thought I had seasoned it well." She'd retort, "How could you taste it and still have it turn out like this? You are really bad at cooking. Jimmy and Karen must feel so pitiful with this food." I'm sorry Jimmy must be having a hard time with such a useless wife. Hurried up and set the table. Despite her constant complaints, she never helped with preparing dinner. In fact, she left all the household chores to me and lounged around during the day. When dinner was finally ready and the whole family sat down to eat, Jimmy and Karen praised the pot roast that my mother-in-law had earlier criticized, saying, "This pot roast is delicious, and yeah, Mom, it's tasty." Then, my mother-in-law said, "Yes, indeed, the seasoning is just right," completely contradicting her earlier criticism. Despite her harassment and nasty commands towards me, she always spoke kindly to Jimmy and Karen, probably not wanting them to dislike her. "Layla is really good at cooking," she'd say in front of them. "Today, Layla did all the housework, considering my health. She is truly a capable wife. Isn't that right, Layla?" In truth, my mother-in-law had just forced all the household responsibilities onto me. As I attempted to deny it, my mother-in-law kicked my leg under the table where no one else could see. Despite her blatant attitude, Jimmy thanked me with a beaming smile, believing that I was always kind to his mom, although it couldn't be further from the truth. I couldn't hide my bewilderment, but Jimmy remained blissfully unaware of the harassment. He genuinely cared for his mother-in-law, and after his father-in-law passed away, he became even more concerned for her well-being. I couldn't bring myself to speak ill of my mother-in-law to Jimmy, who loved her deeply. My fondness for her also prevented me from confiding in anyone about the situation. When it was decided that we would live with my in-laws, Karen, our daughter, was delighted. She loved her grandma, and they were very close, always playing and taking baths together. Mother-in-law's harassment escalated when I came back from shopping one day and found the room in disarray. Mother-in-law, what happened? Why is everything in such a mess? I asked, genuinely surprised. She replied smugly, I couldn't find something, and before I knew it, it became a mess. I knew the house wouldn't be turned upside down just from looking for something. It was clear that she had done it to harass me. Sorry, I'm going to dinner with friends now. Cleanup's on you, she said, leaving me to deal with the aftermath. As expected, I ended up spending the entire day cleaning, unable to focus on anything else. When mother-in-law returned home, she remarked, laundry, dishes, cleaning, none of it's done, making it clear that her intent was to torment me. I clenched my fists, suppressing my anger at my mother-in-law's taunts, and quietly continued with the housework. Hurry up or everyone will come home. If Jimmy realizes what an incapable wife you are, he'll surely divorce you. She sneered, never lifting a finger to help, only rushing and nagging me incessantly. As dinner remained far from ready, my frustration grew. In the end, dinner was late, and Jimmy asked, looking concerned, are you feeling ill? No, it's not that, but I started to explain. But when I glanced at my mother-in-law, she was glaring at me, a silent warning not to speak up. Today has been a bit hectic, I said weakly. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. No, it's totally fine. Jimmy reassured, his kindness shining through. Mother-in-law, however, didn't find his understanding amusing. Instead, her daily harassment towards me intensified. Lately, it wasn't just about me. She began interfering in Karen's affairs, too. You two seem to be trying to get Karen into a private middle school, she accused. Yes, we are. Is there a problem with that? I countered. It's cruel to make her study late every night for exams. Stop it right now. We are not forcing her to study against her will. Karen herself wants to go to a private middle school. Kids should play and have fun. There's no need to force them to study now, I defended. But working hard now will open up more options for her future, and Karen wants this. We're not forcing it on her, I insisted, standing firm against her accusations. Recently, as Karen had been studying late into the night and attending tutoring sessions, our family time had decreased noticeably, and my mother-in-law seemed displeased. Give up on the middle school exams. It's a waste of time, she commanded one day. I couldn't hold back my anger at her disregard for Karen's feelings and her selfish remarks. Isn't it normal to support Karen when she wants to do this? I retorted, surprising my mother-in-law, as I had never talked back before. Karen's exams have nothing to do with you, mother-in-law. Frustrated and feeling like arguing would lead us nowhere, I left, declaring, enough of this. I'm going to pick up Karen. Mother-in-law continued to harass me in front of Jimmy and Karen, seemingly unable to let go of the fact that I had talked back. During dinner that day, she criticized the meal, saying, today's dinner looks plain. Is this all we have? Jimmy, unable to stay silent any longer, snapped at her. Come on, Mom, don't complain about the meal that Layla made. His anger startled mother-in-law, and she quickly backpedaled, saying, oh, I'm sorry. That's not what I meant to say. Not wanting to escalate the situation, I brushed it off with, it's fine. After dinner, while I was washing dishes, mother-in-law approached me and muttered, remember this, before retreating to her room. From then on, every day was filled with fear, wondering what she might do next. Then, one day, it was the day of Karen's acceptance announcement. We nervously headed to the venue. When we checked the bulletin board, Karen's number was clearly written there. You did it, Karen. Awesome. You got accepted. Yay. We were all overjoyed. Karen had been studying tirelessly for months, and thanks to her relentless efforts, she had passed the middle school exams. We have to celebrate today, I exclaimed. Karen, what would you like to eat? Steak, she replied, her absolute favorite. Should we order delivery then? I suggested, and everyone cheered in agreement. On my way home, I called the steakhouse and ordered a luxurious steak for delivery. We also decided to buy a cake, so I made a small detour, asking my mother-in-law to receive the steak delivery at the house. When I called her, she said, "Understood, I'll take care of it." Due to various detours, we were completely past lunchtime by the time we got home. We were all hungry and eagerly anticipating the steak. "I'm starving. I want to eat the steak now," Karen exclaimed. "You're right. We're late. The steak should be here. Let's eat plenty, okay?" I reassured her. Upon our arrival home, we bumped into mother-in-law's friends as they were leaving. They all said in unison, "Thanks for the feast," and left, leaving me puzzled. I had a bad feeling and rushed inside the house. The dining table, where the steak was supposed to be, was in disarray. I asked mother-in-law, "Did you eat the steak?" "Ah, if it's a delivery steak, I enjoyed it with my friends at a luncheon. You'll pay for it later," she replied defiantly. "What are you doing?" I yelled, utterly shocked by her audacity. "You're probably planning to order delivery and slack off from housework. I won't allow that," she retorted, completely unapologetic. This was supposed to be a celebration for Karen's success, and I had informed mother-in-law in advance that today was Karen's exam acceptance announcement. It seemed she had forgotten, which explained her thoughtless actions. When Karen and Jimmy arrived late, Karen, having overheard our conversation in the corridor, was in tears. "Grandma saw me," she said, her voice choked with disappointment. Carrie had been excited to share the news with her grandmother quickly, but it seemed inconceivable to her that her own grandmother had forgotten such an important day. "Mother-in-law, today was Karen's middle school acceptance announcement. How could you forget such an important day?" "That's awful," I exclaimed, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief at her callousness. Mother-in-law seemed unable to hide her agitation, her lack of remorse only deepening our disappointment in her. "Why today, Layla? Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Mother-in-law's voice trembled with a mix of surprise and guilt. "I did tell you," I replied, my anger overshadowed by disappointment. I felt a strange certainty that left me too numb to be furious. Karen had worked hard and earned her acceptance. We had planned to celebrate by indulging in her favorite steak, but mother-in-law had eaten it with her friends, oblivious to the significance of the day. "I called you about the delivery, didn't I?" I challenged, hoping for some explanation. "Mom, did you do it on purpose?" Jimmy's voice carried a mix of hurt and confusion. Mother-in-law's face grew paler, her attempt to find an excuse faltering. I had suspected her harassment for a while, but now it seemed Jimmy was starting to understand too. Without a word, she approached Karen, offering a weak apology and suggesting we all go to the steakhouse, insisting she would pay. Karen's response was sharp and unforgiving. "I hate Grandma," she declared, pushing mother-in-law away and fleeing to her room. Witnessing her granddaughter's rejection seemed to stun mother-in-law. She stumbled, falling to the ground, unable to comprehend the magnitude of being despised by someone she loved so dearly. After that, I confided in Jimmy about the ongoing harassment, my heart heavy with the burden of secrecy. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, a mix of guilt and concern in his eyes. "I couldn't say anything when I thought about you and Karen," I confessed, regret coloring my words. "I'm sorry for forcing you all this time," he said, his voice heavy with remorse. "You don't have to endure this anymore." Jimmy suggested we move to escape the constant torment. Karen also expressed her desire to live away from mother-in-law, providing us with a reason to leave without hesitation. On the day we moved, while I was packing, mother-in-law entered the room, her eyes reflecting sorrow and desperation. "Are you really leaving the house?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Yes, you must be glad to be away from me," she continued, her words heavy with self-pity. "I don't exactly hate you," I replied, my voice tinged with exhaustion. "Can you please leave? You're in the way of my packing." But instead of leaving, mother-in-law began to plead desperately. "Please don't leave. I'll apologize for everything. Please, I can't bear to be apart from Carrie." No matter how much I explained, she wouldn't let go, clinging to me and crying. her desperation hanging heavy in the air. So, I made a proposal. Actually, we are moving to my parents' house. If you really can't bear to be apart from Carrion, will you come with us? My father, usually stern with a scary face, knew that mother-in-law was aware of this. I said it somewhat maliciously, thinking she would never agree. Surprisingly, she did. I understand. That's fine with me, she said, leaving me stunned. It seemed she wanted to be with Carrion that badly. I agreed to live together since she wouldn't harass me in front of my parents, and if she did, I could report it to my father. Jimmy added, sorry, if something happens with my mom coming along, feel free to kick her out. So we all moved to my parents' house, and the cohabitation began. My father seemed dissatisfied, then mother-in-law came with us. Of course, he knew how she had harassed me and ruined Carrion's celebration. He didn't blame her directly, but his silent pressure kept mother-in-law shrinking. She spoke less and seemed downcast. When my mother and I asked for help with housework, she readily complied and worked hard. I couldn't help but laugh at her changed appearance. Life went on without any incidents for a while. But finally, mother-in-law reached her limit and yelled, I'm sick of this house. Your father is intimidating, and Carrion can't get through to him. I think Jimmy's attitude towards mother-in-law had become colder because he couldn't endure various things anymore. Karen, let's go home together, mother-in-law said, trying to forcibly pull Carrion and leave the house. Mother-in-law, stop it. Can't you see Carrion doesn't want to go? It's better to be with me than in this house, I intervened. Just then, my father arrived. What are you doing? Knock it off, he thundered. Frightened by my father's forcefulness, mother-in-law froze in fear. I allowed you to live with us because you said you didn't want to be apart from your granddaughter. But if you try to take Carrion against her will, I'll call the police for kidnapping. I didn't mean it that way, my father warned her sternly. Hearing my father's shout, Jimmy also rushed over. Mom, what are you doing? Just leave us. We can't be bothered by you anymore. I'm cutting ties completely. No way. Mother-in-law protested. But Carrion shook off her hand and screamed, Get out. Even mother-in-law seemed shocked by this, dropping her shoulders and leaving the house in tears. Now she's back at her house, living a lonely life. Afterward, mother-in-law became reclusive, and it seems that even neighbors and friends started keeping their distance. On the other hand, our family is living peacefully every day. Carrion is studying hard at a private school, and Jimmy has become very friendly with my parents, especially my father, with whom he drinks every day. I wish I had talked to Jimmy earlier and moved to my parents' house. I'll be staying over tonight, so please accommodate us, she said. Excuse me, I've mentioned before that I'm watching a play nearby tonight. Since it ends late, I suggested we all stay here during her son's absence, I explained. The mother-in-law arrived unexpectedly with 7 friends, seemingly disregarding my situation. She acted as if everything was settled and said, But you'll be back soon, right? We'll just drop our stuff and head out for a while. Can you prepare dinner and sleeping arrangements for us? Having endured the mother-in-law's brazen behavior without confrontation for so long, I finally reached my limit. I can't. I have a trip planned starting now. What trip? Who are you going with? Her surprised response came as a shock to the usually non-confrontational me. Having had enough of her excessive harassment, I finally drew the line. Please give me back that necklace. It was time for the mother-in-law to face the consequences of her actions. I introduced myself as Michelle Gorman, a 30-year-old housewife. After getting married, I used my administrative experience to work as a computer class instructor. My husband, Mike, served as the president of his father's subsidiary, keeping him busy most days, though he sometimes appeared deep in thought. I cherished our favorite movie dates when he'd say, I feel lighter when I'm with you. I wished I could ease his burdens and offer advice, but expressing my opinions had always been a struggle for me. Since I was young, I preferred listening to others over talking about myself. My older brother, 4 years my senior, always looked out for me. I used to resent this about myself, but Mike's reassurance had boosted my confidence. Mike also had an older brother who served as the vice president in their father's company. His wife, Mindy, was close in age to me, and we got along well. She was a career-driven woman, both reliable and kind. I admired how she stood her ground and expressed her opinions while remaining understanding and adaptable. Witnessing her confront the mother-in-law had been truly impressive. However, since they lived far away, I regretted not being able to see them often. On the other hand, the mother-in-law behaved with the air of a company president's daughter, always confident, but her stubbornness and arrogance were evident. She often reprimanded me, overwhelming me with her pressure. "Michelle, you're the wife of Mike, the president. You should quit being a computer instructor and fully support your husband," she'd say. Mike would back me up, but she'd remain displeased. I sometimes felt relieved that we lived apart. I hoped for a peaceful life with Mike and eventually being blessed with children. However, Mike's father's sudden passing from a heart attack changed everything. It was hard for everyone to accept, yet Mike and his brother had to think about the company's future. Mike decided to stay in New York for a while, and I returned home, anxiously waiting for his call. With added responsibilities on their shoulders, I worried about the two of them. After discussions with his brother, it was decided that Mike would transfer to the New York headquarters, while his brother became the president and Mike was appointed vice president. We searched for a house in New York, settling on a pre-built single-family home, even though it was a bit far from the station. It provided a sense of security and good sunlight, promising a comfortable life with Mike. As Mike had to work late due to the handover tasks, I made sure to create a comfortable environment at home for him to rest properly. I also prepared balanced lunches, wanting to do everything I could to support him. A month flew by in this manner. One evening, Mike arrived home and said, "I'm hungry. Thanks for working so late. I'll get dinner ready. Thanks, Michelle. My mom mentioned she wants to come over this weekend. Is that okay?" I had been worried that she might be feeling down since my father-in-law passed away, so hearing this was a relief. Of course, we still have some areas to tidy up, but she's more than welcome. "Thanks, I'll let her know." "Oh, maybe I should invite my brother and his wife too." "Yeah, that sounds good," I replied, even though it felt a bit inappropriate. Moving here had made it easier for me to frequently meet Mindy, my sister-in-law, which was a pleasant surprise. That weekend, we all gathered to catch up on the current situation and share memories of my father-in-law. It was really sad that Dad was gone, but I felt I shouldn't be down forever, so I started taking up a hobby. Seeing my mother-in-law's cheerful face brought relief. She always carried herself with elegance, wearing beautiful dresses and lovely accessories. Today, she looked stylish with a pale purple scarf that stood out. She seemed to have lost a little weight, but her firmness in advising Mike and his brother on company matters hadn't changed. However, since my father-in-law's passing, I noticed that her strict remarks towards me increased. "Michelle, we're running low on drinks. Could you go buy some, Jessica?" "I can go get them," I offered. "Oh, can you? That would be helpful," she replied, but I sensed that she was more commanding towards me than she was with Mindy. I thought she might be struggling with the loss of her husband, so I decided to observe and let her comments slide for a while. After dinner, Mike drove everyone home, and the night came to an end. Since then, for some reason, my mother-in-law began visiting our home frequently. She started criticizing my housework and complaining about Mindy. Moreover, she began going through our fridge without permission, which left me stunned. "Michelle, Mike's so busy right now. You should pay more attention to the meals you prepare for him. What if he collapses too? And there's still trash here. Can't you clean up perfectly?" It continued like this, and it felt as though she was picking on me just to pass the time. But when Mindy would visit, she'd quickly leave, saying she had other things to do. She claimed it wasn't because she disliked me, but I felt otherwise. Perhaps she found it easier to assert herself over me, who rarely countered, than over Mindy, who always spoke her mind. I contemplated finding a job to spend less time at home, but even after finding one, The harassment from my mother-in-law intensified. Michelle, we ran out of barbecue sauce at our place. Get some, please. While you're out, I brought a container with me, so let me take some leftovers, she said casually. Her audacity sometimes left me dumbfounded. She could just as easily buy premium ingredients from an upscale store. Then, an incident occurred. A necklace I cherished disappeared. It was a keepsake from my mother, which I had kept safely on a shelf in my room. The only person I could think of was my mother-in-law, who frequently visited. Though I didn't want to suspect her, she often looked around our home and probably knew where most things were. Despite searching everywhere, it remained missing, so I decided to confront her about it. That's when she responded with a fierce yell. You probably lost it yourself. How dare you suspect me? What kind of person are you? I'm sorry, I searched everywhere I could think of, but I couldn't find it. It's a keepsake from my mother, and it means a lot to me. More than the anger I felt towards being accused, I was devastated about losing my mother's keepsake, and tears began to roll down. I don't care, it's just a necklace. Why don't you just have Mike buy you a new one? She retorted. I realized she wouldn't understand my feelings and decided not to discuss it further. However, incidents kept occurring where money from my wallet and other items around the house would go missing. Though I kept a watchful eye on my mother-in-law's actions, I never saw her take anything. Confused and emotionally exhausted, I confided in many who asserted that my mother-in-law was definitely the prime suspect. No one else had access to our home. The realization saddened me, yet there was no concrete evidence of her theft, and I couldn't understand why she would do such a thing, especially since she continued to live a lavish lifestyle from the inheritance left by my father-in-law. Seeing my distress, Mindy made a suggestion. Little did I know at the time where this would lead. About 2 weeks after speaking to Mindy, I'll be off then, Michelle. Just relax and enjoy your trip, okay? Be careful. Mike and his brother were going on a business trip to meet with a company from another state. Knowing about their trip, Mindy thought it was the perfect opportunity for me to take a break. It might be a good time for us to take a break, Mindy said, inviting me on a short vacation. Recently, I have been mentally and physically drained, so the idea of a getaway was appealing. I packed early and placed my travel bag near the entrance, waiting for departure time. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Wondering who it could be, I checked the video feed to find my mother-in-law. Not only her, but she was accompanied by several others. Hello, Michelle. I brought some friends. Please open up, she said. Opening the front door, I found my mother-in-law and about 7 of her friends, all carrying large bags. Were they going somewhere? We're staying here tonight. Make us comfortable. Excuse me, didn't I mention it? We're seeing a play nearby tonight, and since it ends late, we're all staying here. This was news to me, and my departure time was approaching. Oh, did I inconvenience you? I heard from Jessica that you were open to having us. I hadn't heard anything of the sort, and it seemed she was making up the story as she went along. Growing increasingly frustrated, I replied firmly, I'm sorry, but I wasn't informed of this, and I have plans. To my reply, she looked taken aback. But you'll be back soon, right? We'll drop our bags and head out for a bit. Just prepare dinner and sleeping arrangements for us, she said, ignoring the fact that I had plans. I knew I couldn't let this slide. I can't. I'm going on a trip. A trip with whom? With Mindy. Oh, just with Mindy? You can go any time. We've come all this way just for today. How long are you going to make us wait? Just then, I noticed something glinting around her neck. Wait, that necklace you're wearing. To my astonishment, it was the same necklace that was a keepsake from my mother. Jessica, where did you get that necklace? Why, it's just one of my collections. Is there a problem? She answered with a smug look. That can't be right. That necklace is a limited edition, and not many are out there. While I was exchanging words with her, Mindy arrived. I was wondering why you didn't show up at our meeting place and didn't contact me, so this is what was happening. I'm sorry I couldn't get in touch, Mindy. Seeing my expression, Mindy instantly knew something was amiss. What happened? I got upset because the necklace she's wearing is the same one as my mother's that went missing recently. The one you kept in that box, Mindy said loud enough for everyone to hear. Suddenly, my mother-in-law, trying to keep it from her friends, whispered to us, "Can you stop? It's embarrassing. Do you want to accuse me of theft?" My mother-in-law snapped, her voice firm. Mindy answered back just as firmly, "Do you have any proof that I stole it? It's embarrassing having such unreasonable daughters-in-law. Please don't make a scene in front of my friends." With that, my mother-in-law turned back to her friends, wearing a smile. "Well, let's go inside, everyone." As she attempted to move inside, something struck me. The initials, Jessica. "Can I have a look, please?" I asked quickly. Mindy hurried behind her and checked the necklace. "Enough of this. What's your mother's name?" "It's Kate Young. So the initials should be Kai." I pointed out the engraved initials on the necklace, confirming it was indeed my mother's keepsake. The friends looked horrified and stepped back. But my mother-in-law wasn't willing to back down. "Stop this. I didn't come here for this. Let's go, everyone." "We're not letting you go," Mindy said determinedly. The friends sensed the tension and quickly muttered, "We're not involved," before heading towards the subway. However, as my mother-in-law tried to follow her friends, Mike, my husband, appeared. "What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be on a business trip?" he questioned, his expression stern. It turned out Mike's business trip was scheduled for the next day. He had purposely given his mother a false date to investigate her actions. Mindy had informed Mike about the missing items from our house, and he had become suspicious. His plan was to invite friends for an overnight stay, expecting his mother to visit when she thought he wasn't home. "What do you want at our house?" I confronted my mother-in-law as she tried to leave. "Give it back. That necklace belongs to Michelle's parents." "Why do you have it, Mom?" "It's not what you think. I found it in my purse. Michelle must have set me up," she retorted, trying to shift the blame to me. "Do you really think such a lie would work? There's no way Michelle would do something like that. First, give the necklace back to Michelle. We'll talk after that." Reluctantly, my mother-in-law took off the necklace and threw it on the ground. She attempted to run away, but we tried to chase her, only to stop when we saw police officers arriving. "Why are you talking about entering our house when we weren't home? I never did such a thing." "I always come when you're home," my mother-in-law protested, looking annoyed. The police officers explained that a local resident had reported someone sneaking into our backyard and entering the house when the owners were away. They mentioned the witness had seen my mother-in-law using a spare key hidden in our backyard. Mike's realization about the spare key sent shivers down our spines. "Why were you coming into our house when we weren't home?" Mike questioned his mother, his voice filled with confusion and disappointment. "It's all lies. You're going to believe some unknown person's story," she retorted. But the police officers stepped in calmly. "Let's talk about this at the station." "I didn't do anything." "Mike, say something." "Stop this," my mother-in-law pleaded, but it was clear she had a lot to answer for. The mother-in-law collapsed to the ground, seemingly out of options, her escape routes dwindling. However, just when it appeared she was defeated, she flew into a rage. "After your father passed away, I felt so lonely. Seeing her always so cheerful, I couldn't stand it. I felt better seeing her troubled. I wanted her to feel the pain I felt," she spat out, her anger irrational and unfounded. Mike was red-faced, struggling to comprehend her twisted reasoning. "Mike, wait. Let me speak," I said, stepping in front of him, feeling the need to confront the issue head-on. "I understand where you're coming from, Jessica. Perhaps I've been neglectful by always brushing off our talks. However, stealing is a different matter entirely. Did you want to upset me? Don't be ridiculous. Did you find joy in pushing someone to their limits with such a twisted and dirty scheme? Did that fill the void of your loneliness? Shut up. What do you know about me? If you're feeling down, then tell us. We can't read minds. Don't make fun of me. Why would I tell you anything, you worthless daughter-in-law?" She snapped back. "Mom, Michelle's right," Mike said, trying to calm the situation. but his words fell on deaf ears. Seeing that the situation wasn't progressing, the police intervened, suggesting they move to the station. "Are you really going to take me in? I can't believe this," she protested, resisting arrest. Despite her resistance, given the eyewitness accounts of her unlawful entry and suspicion of theft, the police decided to question my mother-in-law. She was promptly arrested on charges of unlawful entry and theft. She continued to protest, demanding a lawyer and refusing to eat the food given to her. However, during visitation, her father exploded in anger, urging her to deeply reflect on her actions. To that, her attitude completely changed. She cried and apologized, seemingly accepting the reality. Perhaps losing her husband had left her searching for her place. Were her fancy clothes and jewelry merely armor to keep herself strong? I began to wonder if her different attitudes towards me and my sister-in-law were attempts to mask her vulnerabilities. However, her excessive desires and inability to control them were a separate issue. Making wrong judgments had led to this unfortunate incident. I was surprised to see the event escalate to this magnitude. Realizing that she had been using the spare key to enter our house without our knowledge genuinely terrified me. Later, I found out that the couple living diagonally across from us had reported her. The wife, who works from home, had noticed my mother-in-law entering our yard suspiciously multiple times and found it odd. I'm nothing but grateful for their brave actions. Since then, we've been leading a peaceful life. To be safe, we changed our locks and stopped hiding a spare key in the yard. Mike severed ties with his mother and made her promise not to contact us ever again. If she attempted to, he warned of legal action. After her release, she returned to her rural childhood home and is reportedly leading a humble life, a stark contrast to her past lavish lifestyle. Being watched by her father, she helps around the house from early morning. I truly hope she reevaluates her past excessive actions. Meanwhile, my own father has moved in with us. In case my mother-in-law decides to pay another unexpected visit, he's here to ensure my safety. But there's another reason he's with us. I'm currently expecting our first child. Anticipating the birth of his grandchild, my kind father and the support of Mike make me want to be a mother who embodies both tenderness and strength. While money and possessions can provide a sense of fulfillment, it's the presence of loved ones that truly fills the heart. We're discussing living arrangements and surrounded by those dear to us. We aim to protect our peaceful daily lives. I was looking forward to a fun trip with my girlfriends, using your card, when out of the blue, I received a call from Bryan. I had already noticed his suspicious behavior, coming home late, secretive phone conversations with Nicole, and restlessness around the house. Was he plotting something with her all along? My suspicion that he might have teamed up with Nicole for some scheme seemed to be coming true. Luckily, I was prepared for such a situation. When Bryan mentioned the trip, I decided to feign surprise. "Mine, huh? What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my composure as I prodded him to explain. The truth was, I already knew he was leaving for the trip today. Frankly, I found it unbelievable that he thought he could pull a fast one on me without planning it better. I had been patient with everything until that moment. However, now all I felt was a burning desire to get back at him. I had a revenge plan ready. It was about time we fought back against those insufferable siblings, especially considering all the patience we have shown over the years. I hoped they were enjoying their trip, completely unaware that one of their fellow travelers was on my side. My name is Pamela Smith, and I'm 33 years old, living with my husband Bryan. I started working at my current company right after high school and climbed the corporate ladder through hard work and determination. Having acquired several certifications and a proven track record, I earned my position as a lead at the young age of 21. Despite my relative youth, I was Bryan's superior at work. I was tasked with training Bryan and 2 others when they joined the company. Despite being close in age, I was their supervisor. Bryan often complimented my dedication and ambition. Over time, our professional relationship turned into a romantic one. Despite my initial reservations, I fell for him, and our relationship became typical: dinners, drives, and eventually moving in together. However, after moving in, I noticed Bryan's sloppiness. I brushed it off, thinking he was comfortable enough with me to be himself. When he proposed, we discussed our future. He expressed his desire for me to quit my job and become a stay-at-home wife, managing the house and raising kids. While I didn't mind the idea, I was concerned about finances. I wanted to keep working and be flexible, especially if we were to buy a house. Our different views on finances and future plans created tension in our relationship, making me question his intentions further. We decided to discuss my job situation, and I reluctantly agreed. I didn't really want to quit my job, but I felt it was necessary to suggest it, or Bryan might keep pushing the issue indefinitely. Before our wedding, we held an engagement party with both our families. It was there that I met Bryan's sister, Nicole, for the first time. She barged into the bride and groom's waiting room without knocking, sized me up, snickered, and said, "So this is who Bryan chose. A bit plain compared to his past choices, huh? Oh, I'm Nicole, your sister-in-law. I'm the type who doesn't hold back with family, so heads up." I stammered, I'm Pamela. Nice to meet you," as Nicole waved her hand dismissively and left the room. Her upfront attitude left me stunned, but it became clear that Nicole was quite the character. Later, I greeted Nicole's husband, who seemed like a decent guy. The wedding went off without a hitch, and Bryan and I purchased a house we both liked. With the prospect of a busy life ahead, I put more energy into my work. One ordinary day off, the doorbell unexpectedly rang. Since I was occupied, I asked Bryan to answer it. He returned, chatting and laughing, and I found out that Nicole had dropped by. "Pamela, hey there. Bryan's doing pretty well, huh? Owning such a big house, good for him. After all, he's my little brother, right?" Nicole remarked. Bryan played up his achievements since he probably told his sister that he had bought the house himself. I had contributed to the down payment and mortgage payments, but Bryan insisted on having his name on the title. Since we were living together, I thought it didn't matter whose name was on the title, but the way he explained it to his sister annoyed me. I decided to hold my tongue and not make a scene. "I've got some snacks. Bryan works really hard, you know," I said, trying to be polite. Nicole commented, "Why does Pamela sound so bossy? She's not the boss or anything." Bryan chimed in, "Well, I am Pamela's supervisor at work." Nicole seemed surprised. "Oh, that's right. Did I not mention that?" Nicole then took an unexpected turn, saying, "When I started the job, Pamela was already a manager. Since she started working right after dropping out of high school, it couldn't be helped. If it were me, I'd surpass her in no time." I was taken aback and replied, "Wait, you dropped out of high school? You look so serious, and yet you're less accomplished than me." Nicole shrugged it off, saying, "Is there a problem just because I dropped out of high school?" Bryan interjected, "No, not really. But Pamela, since he didn't graduate from high school, and I'm your sister-in-law, I can ask you for anything, right?" I couldn't fathom the logic of their conversation. I asked, "That's true, Pamela. Whatever my sister says is the final word. If you refuse, I'll kick you out of the house." I struggled to comprehend the bizarre situation. Why was my lack of a high school diploma suddenly relevant, and why would refusing my sister-in-law's demands lead to eviction? I offered a polite smile and quickly retreated to the kitchen, overhearing Bryan's discussion with his sister, which appeared to be a serious one. Afterward, Nicole approached me and said, "Pamela, I've got a favor to ask. I need to borrow some money, like $5,000. Please." I couldn't help but react. "How is that a little money? That's a lot. What do you need it for anyway?" Nicole insisted, "Come on, it's just $5,000. You're a supervisor, right? You must have a good salary." I sighed, realizing that this situation was getting even more complicated than I had anticipated. I found myself in a situation where I needed to cover the remaining renovation costs. "Didn't you just brag about your new condo the other day?" I asked Nicole, my sister-in-law. She replied casually, "Oh, did I? Anyway, Bryan said he'd lend it to me and told me to ask you." I was taken aback. What? Why would he decide that without asking me? I questioned. Nichols' tone turned threatening. Listen, Pamela. Either give me the money or I'll call the boss right now and tell him you want to quit. Which one do you prefer? Feeling cornered, I reluctantly agreed, but I set a condition. I'll lend you the money, Nicole, but on one condition. We need to draw up a promissory note. Nicole grumbled. What? Even though we're family? I want it in writing. So when you come to get the money, make sure to bring your ID with a picture, okay? The next day, Nicole reluctantly complied with my request, bringing all the necessary documentation. However, as the days passed, I realized how spoiled Bryan was by his sister. Nicole used the money I lent her to buy designer items, and soon, she started asking for more, without any hesitation. Each time, I made her sign a promissory note. A month later, I received an unexpected promotion at work. I was ecstatic about becoming the department manager, a step closer to my goal of becoming the head manager. I rushed home to share the news with Bryan, who had taken the day off. Excitedly, I exclaimed, Bryan, guess what? Today my boss offered me the position of department manager. I've always wanted this, and now I'm getting closer to my goal. Bryan's reaction was far from what I expected. He was furious. Wait, what? Pamela, you're getting promoted? I don't understand. Did you accept the offer? Well, yeah, I've told you about my goal before, right? I defended myself, trying to make him understand my perspective. His anger escalated. Hold on. You should have asked for my permission before making such a decision. What were you thinking? Plus, I've told you I wanted you to be a stay-at-home wife, haven't I? How come you're getting promoted and I'm still stuck at the same position? Doesn't that seem odd? Bryan made a call, and shortly after, Nicole arrived. Accusing me of stealing Bryan's opportunity, she mocked me, saying, I heard you stole Bryan's promotion opportunity. What's the big idea? No, I didn't steal anything. At our company, promotions are based on performance. Bryan sided with his sister, questioning my competence at my job. Feeling overwhelmed, I tried to resist, but they restrained me. Together, they rummaged through my purse, taking my bank card. Their laughter echoed in my ears as they left. Tears welled up in my eyes. Regret gnawed at my heart. It was clear that I had made a terrible mistake marrying Bryan. As the realization dawned on me, I knew I needed to find a good divorce lawyer. That night, Bryan didn't come home, and the next day, he shamelessly flaunted the extravagant expenses he had incurred using my money. The situation had reached a breaking point, and I knew I needed to take control of my life once and for all. I clenched my fists, suppressing the urge to snap back at Bryan, especially when more employees began pouring into the office. On my way home, I checked my bank account and was shocked to find that $8,000 had been withdrawn. Once I confronted Bryan about it, I couldn't contain my frustration. Bryan, what were you thinking? Taking out $8,000 for fancy barbecues and luxurious bars. That money is what I had saved from my single days. And now you've spent it without even discussing it with me. His response was infuriating. It's my money, and I've already spent it. Can't do anything about it now, he said dismissively before retreating to the bathroom. In that moment, I made up my mind. I was going to divorce him. Over the following weeks, I consulted a lawyer, and the divorce preparations were underway. Bryan's behavior grew even more suspicious. He started coming home late and rushed out of the house on his days off. My suspicions deepened, and I considered hiring a private investigator. Then, I received an unexpected call from Kevin, Nicole's husband, Bryan's sister. Kevin was concerned about Nicole's behavior and mentioned that she had been spending a lot of time at Bryan's place, leaving home late and sometimes not returning at all. During our conversation, I shared everything that had happened, including the money I had lent to Nicole and Bryan's reckless spending. Kevin sighed and apologized for his wife's behavior, admitting that he had considered divorce but couldn't take action. When I suggested he use the evidence I had gathered, he hesitated but ultimately agreed to cooperate. We decided to expose their deceit. Kevin informed me that Nicole and Bryan might be planning a trip, supported by the brochures and travel club cards he found. We devised a plan together, communicating via text and meticulously preparing for our next steps. 2 weeks later, Bryan left the house early one morning, thinking he was fooling us all. Kevin had informed me about his departure, so I was ready. A few hours later, Bryan called me, gloating about the trip. "I'm going to have a blast on your card with my sis and friends," he said, thinking he had successfully deceived me. But I was prepared. I decided to act surprised. "Mine? What do you mean?" "Explain," I replied, feigning ignorance. Bryan, not realizing his plan was unraveling, elaborated. "We planned this trip ages ago. Kevin was just our backup plan in case something happened." Little did he know, I had my own backup plan. Kevin and I were ready to expose their lies and ensure they faced the consequences of their deceitful actions. "We felt that you've become too arrogant lately and decided it was time to teach you a lesson. Got it now? You can't stand up to us anymore," Nicole sneered, a hint of superiority in her voice. But I had reached my breaking point. I don't have to tolerate this any longer. I've been patient for so long. A little payback isn't too much to ask for. Bryan chimed in, confident. "I don't feel anything anymore, not even a shred of emotion." I challenged him, reminding him of his earlier claim. "Bryan, what did you say earlier about your debit card?" He responded, playing his part in their scheme. "I told you about your debit card, right?" "Huh? I have my card in my wallet, though." I checked my wallet, puzzled. "What? What are you talking about? Because here it is." "Wait, what the heck is this?" Bryan's voice carried a hint of satisfaction. "You just noticed. Slow on the uptake, huh? Didn't you take my old gym membership card from the fitness club I used to go to? It's the same color and same stiffness." I gasped, realizing their trick. "Oh my God, it does say fitness club." But I swear, when I checked it, it was definitely a debit card. Bryan revealed their scheme with a smug tone. "Actually, last night, I switched the debit card with the membership card. Seems like you didn't check this morning and just went with it." I felt a mix of disappointment and frustration. "So, it was a scheme by Nicole and Bryan, huh? I'm so disappointed." Nicole added her piece, trying to maintain her arrogance. "Bryan, tough break, huh? Don't get too cocky just because you're my stepsister. Got it? You'll remember this when we get back." Ignoring their taunts, I responded coldly, "I won't accept anything but cash." Bryan attempted to bribe me, but I stood my ground. "Well, we'll see about that. Look forward to it." Ignoring their banter, I hung up the phone and went back to sleep, knowing I had something up my sleeve. Later in the afternoon, my phone rang incessantly. My screen was flooded with missed calls and messages. First, I called my brother-in-law, Kevin, and then answered Bryan's call, ready to play my part. "Hey, finally. Send the money ASAP, please," Bryan pleaded, pretending to be cold. Unfazed, I questioned him. "You said Kevin would help, right? Or is he not there?" Bryan hesitated before responding. "What? Do you know something?" Ignoring his question, I kept my tone even. "Anyway, it's freezing, and Kevin's not here. Should I clue you in?" I decided to reveal my plan. "Since you and Nicole teamed up, Kevin and I did too. Simple, right? Now do you get why I entertained you guys for so long on that first call? To buy time." Bryan was taken aback, and Kevin. He hopped on another plane and is coming back here. Feeling triumphant, I hung up the phone once I received confirmation that Kevin had boarded the plane. Got it. "What's your deal with my husband, huh? Don't tell me you're wrong. We teamed up to get back at you. Now find your own way back. See you." With that, I hung up on Nicole and Bryan. Kevin, my brother-in-law, was on his way back, supporting my plan. As soon as Bryan and his group returned, they confronted me, their voices rising in anger. "Pamela, what the hell were you thinking? Be prepared to move out, okay? Kevin's with you, isn't he? Why did you even come back first? Unbelievable. Are you okay with me leaving you? Apologize." I commanded them sternly, "Shut it and sit down." Kevin, usually calm, shocked Bryan and his companion into silence, making them sit down immediately. The lawyer I had called and handed out his business cards to both of them, leaving them dumbfounded. Kevin and I handed them a stack of papers. As they read through them, their faces turned pale. Bryan questioned, "Wait a minute, this mentions property division. You're not saying it's about divorce, are you?" Nicole added, "It's written on mine too. Is this about a divorce? What did I do? Divorce has got to be a joke, right?" Ignoring their confusion, I declared, "I've been recording your daily outbursts, even the call you made from your vacation, Bryan. I can't continue like this with you." Bryan scoffed. "Hold on, are you sure?" "I affirmed I said it, didn't I? I'm demanding half of the down payment from when we bought the house, the rest of the mortgage, and the repayment of the savings you spent from when I was single." "Nicole, you spent the money you borrowed from me and also withdrew from my savings with Bryan, right? You're going to repay that." Bryan tried to destroy the evidence, stomping on the recorder, while Nicole tore the promissory note into pieces. Despite their attempts, I remained composed. "Oops, indeed, you two don't think things through. Nicole, I have a claim against you two for spending all the savings and such. Say hi to that guy you got close to at the bar for me." Both of them shamelessly cried, facing the consequences of their actions. I presented my bill to Bryan, totaling $115,000, and to Nicole, amounting to $31,000. Kevin, too, demanded $120,000 from Nicole. We settled everything without going to court. Packed and ready, I left the house, ignoring Bryan and Nicole's desperate attempts to reconnect. I blocked their contacts and focused on my new life. Later, when passing by my old house, I saw it was up for sale. I had moved into a condo, and my career flourished. I received a promotion to regional director, a position I had always aimed for. Kevin and I maintained a strong friendship, and life felt just right. I'm glad I got divorced. What happened between me and Kevin afterward is a story for another time.
I've always held a special place in my heart for my grandparents, a sentiment that dates back to my early years. Perhaps it was because my parents were frequently away due to work commitments that I found solace in the warm embrace of Grandma and Grandpa. My name is Hilda, and at 31 years old, I stand on the brink of motherhood, eagerly anticipating the arrival of my first child. In these final months of my pregnancy, excitement bubbles within me, yet it's tempered by a nagging concern. My husband, Owen, who just turned 32. My worry stems from the subtle transformation I've observed in him. Lately, he's grown increasingly irritable, a phenomenon that coincides with what experts term digital caregiving. It was during an incident at my grandparents' house, where Owen was setting up their Wi-Fi, that his frustration reached a crescendo. Despite my grandparents' lack of need for Wi-Fi, we visited them occasionally. However, Owen's annoyance was palpable when he couldn't access his favorite paid movie site. He grumbled incessantly, even though my grandparents had personally funded the installation to accommodate his interests. His discontent seemed boundless, and he criticized every aspect of the installation process. My grandmother tried to correct his mispronunciations, pointing out that it was Google, not goggles, and Chrome, not columns. But her corrections only elicited a loud click of his tongue in response. I empathized with his frustration, but it left me with a sense of unease that defied explanation. Eventually, the installation was completed, but the atmosphere grew tense, far worse than the challenges of physical caregiving. It felt like a different, more insidious form of caregiving, one imposed by the digital world. I attempted to reason with Owen, suggesting that there were computer classes available for the elderly that he could learn from someone else. I even proposed hiring professional help if needed, but he dismissed my concerns with a sarcastic remark, expressing his fatigue and promptly left for his surfing hobby. This behavior was a departure from the man I married, a man who was once patient and kind. In the wake of his temperamental outbursts, Owen's attitude seeped into our home, leaving me feeling abandoned and helpless. I found myself seeking refuge at my grandparents' house, where I unwittingly vented my frustrations. My grandparents, wise in their years, offered a perspective that struck a chord with me. Perhaps, Grandma gently suggested, your husband feels like the impending arrival of the baby is pulling you away from him. The reason my love for my grandparents runs deep is their invaluable life experience, which they generously share as guidance. One evening during a visit, as I prepared to bid them farewell, my grandmother, in her thoughtful way, acknowledged the challenges of managing household chores while pregnant. She handed me a dish of homemade mac and cheese, a small but heartfelt gesture. However, when I served the same mac and cheese for dinner at home, my husband's complaints were swift and unrelenting. Ignoring his grumbles, I gently caressed my growing belly, now more susceptible to frequent kicks and agonizing back pain. My grandmother had prepared the meal with my condition in mind, but the issue went deeper. My husband's concern grew evident as he questioned my frequent visits to Grandma and Grandpa's, connecting it with my choice to bring back mac and cheese. I believe that serving the dish should be evidence enough of my love for him. But much like prenatal depression in expectant mothers, my grandmother suggested that something might be troubling him as well. He expressed his dissatisfaction with our dated dishes, comparing them to the cuisine of the 80s, before announcing his plan to go surfing. He dismissed the idea of eating the mac and cheese, seemingly convinced that the allure of modern pasta would outweigh his nostalgia. With a resigned sigh, I sat alone, wondering if the arrival of our baby might change his perspective, as my grandmother often emphasized the transformative power of a newborn. My hope was faint but persistent. I believed that our child's presence could lift the blues that had settled over us. The labor was grueling, 7 hours of intense pain followed by 3 more in the delivery room. It was a challenging initiation into motherhood, yet the sight of our baby's face made every hardship inconsequential. Despite being tiny, the baby resembled a miniature human down to their tiny fingers. I thought that perhaps my eternal blues and my husband's gloom could both dissipate in the face of this new life. Unfortunately, my husband never visited the hospital during my stay, nor did he make an effort to meet our newborn. Instead, when I returned home from the hospital, I was met with his continued absence. He questioned, his doubt evident in his eyes, "Is this really my child? You've often left home, claiming to visit your grandparents. I find it hard to believe." As I stood on the doorstep, holding our newborn, he coldly demanded, "Give me some of your hair. I need a DNA test to confirm if it's really your child." My heart raced with disbelief. Where did this come from? I thought. I had just endured the excruciating pain of childbirth. Was it fair for him to accuse me like this? Anger surged through me, an intensity I had never felt before. Was he really accusing me of infidelity? What infuriated me more was Owen's complete lack of joy in the presence of such an adorable baby. It felt like my very essence of motherhood was being negated. The next day, pushed beyond my limits, I poured out my grievances to my grandparents, who had come to check on the baby. My grandfather, perhaps trying to offer support from a male perspective, said, "If you haven't done anything wrong, why not take the DNA test? Women can hold their heads high if they are innocent, but sometimes men need evidence to believe. Sharing objective facts is important. If this clears the suspicion, ask him to make it up to you with a nice cake or something." His words did offer a measure of solace, so I decided to submit my hair for the DNA test. I hadn't done anything wrong, and if this resolved things amicably, so be it. I convinced myself of my innocence. However, a week later, Owen slammed a paper with the test results in front of me, his face triumphant. "The test result is here. It's not my child. What's the meaning of this?" he declared, pointing at the paper that confirmed the absence of any genetic match with him. I stared at the paper in utter shock. "This is evidence of adultery," he stated, his voice laced with accusation. I was dumbfounded, with no memory of such an event. Clutching the damning evidence, I went to my grandparents' house, where tears flowed freely in their comforting embrace. After a brief silence, my grandfather spoke gently. "Hilda, you used to come to our house when you were in trouble, didn't you? It's okay. Leave the rest to me." He patted my shoulder with his wrinkled yet reassuring hand and then tenderly stroked my hair. The baby's soft fontanelle, yet to close, felt delicate beneath my touch. From my childhood, my grandfather had always reassured me, saying, "It's okay," and he continued to do so today. Large, heavy tears spilled down my cheeks as I whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa." A few days later, my grandfather made a significant move. He called Owen, summoning us all to their home for a weekend discussion, a discussion inevitably leading toward divorce. Owen arrived, his arrogance evident as he looked down at me, deliberately placing the DNA test results he had shown me earlier onto a table. While my parents were aware of the impending discussion, only the four of us, my grandparents, Owen, and I, were present, per my grandfather's decision. "For now, leave it to me," he had said. As we gathered in the living room of my grandparents' house, my grandfather began the conversation. He distributed copies of the DNA test results, irrefutable proof that there was no blood relation between Owen and the baby. Everyone examined the paper, and my grandfather proudly stated, "This is from Adam's clinic, as written here. There's no denying it." Owen, clearly baffled, asked about the appraisal. "What appraisal?" he questioned, his confusion evident. With an ominous chuckle, my grandfather placed some similar-looking hair on top of a copy of the appraisal result that Owen had prepared. "This is a genuine document from Adams Hospital where the DNA test results are recorded," my grandfather explained. "I had a test done to check the relationship between Grandma and her daughter, in other words, between Hilda's mother and her." I blinked in confusion, struggling to comprehend the situation. "Why?" I stammered, trying to make sense of it all. "Take a good look, Hilda," my grandfather grinned. Compare this DNA report with the one he brought. The format, the style of the document, completely different. Beads of sweat formed on Owen's forehead as my grandfather continued. He recounted how, feeling slighted by Owen's suggestion that I attend computer classes for the elderly, he had indeed attended one. There, he had met a doctor from Adams Hospital. The doctor's familiarity with an appraiser led to an unexpected turn of events. When I saw the appraisal result that Hilda brought, I wondered why it was done at Adams Hospital instead of the Harris Maternity Clinic, where Hilda gave birth, my grandfather explained. "I assumed that if it was the maternity clinic, they would have conducted the test using Hilda's saliva. Truth is stranger than fiction, huh?" Up to this point, the grandfather's eyes had been filled with disbelief. "When I asked the doctor at Adams Hospital," he continued, "he confirmed that your granddaughter hadn't taken any tests here. After further discussions, he suggested that showing you our official document would expose the lie clearly." Owen began to tremble. "This is forgery of private documents," the furious doctor at Adams Hospital had declared. "You should prepare for serious repercussions." "I'm sorry," Owen finally admitted, tears streaming down his face. "It was reckless. I never thought I'd get caught." "What do you mean, never thought?" "That makes it even more unforgivable," the grandfather reprimanded sharply. "I have no intention of forgiving you. I want to make this a tale to take to the grave. Let me tell you how I uncovered the lie." The roles of detective and suspect reversed. Listening to Hilda's claim, the grandfather decided to investigate using the computer skills he had recently acquired. With practiced movements, he logged into the computer and performed a search. "I did an image search for DNA test certificates," he said, emphasizing the words Google Chrome as his grandparents engaged in a light-hearted comedy routine. "The very first image that came up was identical to the document my husband initially showed me." Owen, now sobbing, was handed a bundle of papers by the grandfather. "Naturally, we're curious about the motive behind this forgery," the grandfather said, his tone stern. "I hacked into your computer." Upon hearing about Owen's surprisingly technical skills, he reflexively raised his head in astonishment. Hacking. It wasn't just him who shouted, "I did too. To be precise, I snooped into your computer, the one in your room." "How did you know the password?" "It must be 4646 or 4633. Owen stammered in surprise. "I heard it from a retired cop I met in a computer class," I said, explaining further. "The surfers around this area mostly use 4646 or 4633 in their pins." "Ah," Owen exclaimed in realization. "It means going off." "Exactly," I confirmed. The senior network at the computer class is something to be feared. So I tried inputting it on a whim, and lo and behold, I got access just like that. Grandpa continued, his excitement palpable. But cracking the password is impressive. But there's more. You know, when you look at the timeline on Google Maps, it shows all of your activity history. Sweat dripped from his chin onto the table. The ink on the fake DNA test report is smudging, so I investigated. And just so you know, this wasn't taught in class. I found this method by searching tirelessly to protect my precious grandchild. I searched for all the days when Hilda came to vent and the days you went surfing. I was shocked. All the destinations were shady motels. Here's the printed proof, Grandpa declared, slamming a stack of papers onto the table. But this alone won't. No, this is more than enough, don't you think? Ready to confess. Owen hesitated, but before he could respond, Grandpa ignored him and brought over a tablet. I borrowed all the data saved on your computer. Allowing messages to be viewed on the computer backfired on you. Flirting with this woman called Mally, I've transferred all that data onto this tablet. Grandpa opened the tablet screen, revealing a flood of evidence of Owen's infidelity, including messages like, "Hotel Lagoon was nice, and I really want us to be a real couple soon." Winky face. Owen couldn't say a word anymore. "It was you who told me to go to the computer class, wasn't it?" Grandpa delivered the final blow, his voice firm with disappointment. "How dare you neglect your heavily pregnant wife at such a delicate time? Realize the lowly act you have done as a man. You don't deserve to be the father of my adorable great-grandchild. You framed Hilda for cheating, hurt her, and used your own child as an excuse to frolic with your mistress. It's absolutely disgraceful. You deserve to be punished." Owen could only bow down in submission as Grandpa added insult to injury. "I've copied the forged data from the DNA test report you made as evidence of your criminal activity," he said, rendering him completely incapacitated. Naturally, I ended up deciding to divorce him right after giving birth. But I received a hefty amount of compensation for his adultery, and of course, from his mistress as well. I made him pay child support in a lump sum. So financially, I've gotten a bit comfortable. I'm thinking of looking for a daycare for my child to attend soon. As the saying goes, when the money is gone, so is the relationship, and it was exactly the case with him and his mistress. I got inundated with crying emails from Owen saying, "I'm broke, and the woman has left me. Please take me back," but I promptly blocked him. More importantly, he's being sued by Adam's clinic for forging private documents. There's no way I could reconcile with such a person. Meanwhile, my child has been lovingly welcomed by my grandparents. Recently, they've started to chuckle at the sound of the bell when hitting a stuffed roly-poly toy with their fist. Children grow up fast. Looks just like Grandma, doesn't she? She's going to be a beauty, Grandpa says. No way, she's going to be much more beautiful than me. Grandma laughs too. Let's take pictures and make a photo movie. A baby's face changes every day. Grandpa, in a good mood, heads to his beloved computer. Thank you, Grandpa, Grandma. I really love you both. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you resonated with the content, please leave a positive rating and a comment.
This is a desperate plea for help, and my name is Chelsea. I am a 28-year-old woman, and I find myself in a situation where I desperately need your guidance. My husband Mark and I are on the brink of a major crisis, and I'm utterly lost. We've been married for a year now, but our relationship of 4 years before marriage was harmonious and blissful. However, I confess that my own selfishness led me down a regrettable path. About a month ago, Mark and I went on a double date with his coworker, Chad, who is 32, and his wife, Ellie, also 32. Chad and Mark had a professional history spanning 3 years, and they had attended each other's weddings. We had shared office dinners before, but we weren't particularly close to Chad and Ellie. The idea of making friends as a couple appealed to us, since we had been navigating life mostly on our own. During that fateful double date, I couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy. It seemed as though Mark and I didn't belong at the same table as Chad and Ellie. I was captivated by the way Chad treated his wife, and it made me question my own marriage. The following day, I made a terrible decision. I texted Chad, asking him to go out for drinks. Surprisingly, he agreed immediately, and we met up after my work shift. I lied to Mark, telling him I was going out with friends after work. Chad and I went out, and what started as a casual evening turned into something much more. He was shamelessly flirtatious, and I found myself drawn to his attention. The night escalated, and I ended up waking up alone in a luxurious hotel room, completely naked. I was bombarded with missed calls and messages from Mark, as well as a lengthy text from Ellie. In that message, she bluntly informed me that she was aware of her partner's infidelity and that I wasn't the only one. Strangely, she seemed strangely fine with the situation, but warned me to stay away from Chad. I am now left grappling with the aftermath of my actions, feeling utterly lost and desperate for advice. She was determined to tell my husband the truth. Initially, I attempted to reach out to Chad to inquire about my whereabouts and what had transpired with Ellie. However, my calls went unanswered, automatically diverting to voicemail. In desperation, I returned Mark's call, hoping to alleviate his mounting worries. I assured him that I was merely spending the night at my best friend Shay's place. That's when he dropped the bombshell. He knew I was lying. Mark had diligently contacted all of my friends, and they all stated that they hadn't seen me in weeks. He had even reached out to Shay first, and she too confirmed that she hadn't laid eyes on me for weeks. Mark then requested that I send my location immediately. He arrived at the hotel to pick me up, and as we approached the reception desk, a surprising revelation unfolded. They asked if he was Mr. Chad. In that moment, it dawned on him, and he swiftly whisked me away from the hotel. The ride back home was fraught with deafening silence. He asked me to find a new place and move out the following day. Since that incident, he hasn't set foot in our home. A month has passed, and I've yet to make any attempts to secure a new place to live. I held onto the hope that somehow we would find a way to mend our shattered relationship. However, fear grips me now. I dread the thought of being without him. The prospect of becoming a divorced woman, merely a year into our marriage, terrifies me. I won't deny my wrongdoing, for I know that I was unquestionably in the wrong. I foolishly believed that marriage was about sharing both the joys and sorrows of life together. I acknowledge that cheating is a grave transgression, an irredeemable act. Mark had been an exemplary husband, and I took his unwavering love and support for granted. I am filled with shame and sorrow for letting myself descend into such a pit of darkness, betraying the man who deserved none of this. I allowed lust to cloud my judgment, succumbing to a fleeting temptation that seemed like a solution to a problem that didn't even exist. Now I'm lost, not knowing where he is. I meticulously reviewed our bank transactions together, but there was no trace of him checking into motels or any suspicious expenditures. My attempts to contact my mother-in-law went unanswered, leaving me on the verge of a breakdown. I'm losing my sanity. What on earth should I do? An update. It's been a little over 6 months, and I feel like I'm unraveling. The last time I saw Mark was 7 months ago, when he arrived at our house with divorce papers in hand, accompanied by his mother. She coldly instructed me to sign the papers, pack my bags, and either go back to my parents or find a temporary place to stay until I could relocate. Mark informed me about a court hearing scheduled in precisely 2 weeks. Today, 6 months later, I signed the divorce papers in court. Mark didn't spare me a single glance. I can't bear to let him slip away like this. Is there anything I can do to win him back? Perhaps I could give him space and attempt to reach out again in a few months. When the storm finally subsided, I found myself unable to focus at work and incapable of living my life normally without him. I had managed to secure a new place just a few blocks away from our old home with Mark. I heard he moved back in about 2 weeks ago. The ache for him was relentless. I had taken his love for granted, foolishly comparing our relationship to others. To my disbelief, I discovered that Chad, the man I had betrayed Mark for, didn't even truly love his wife, Ellie. He was with her solely because of her wealth, enjoying a lavish lifestyle funded by her. In my misguided pursuit of something different, I lost my love for someone who had once seemed like the perfect husband, but had recklessly betrayed his wife with multiple women. I am aware, Chelsea, that I cannot condone your actions. You cheated on Mark, a man who loved you deeply, and the consequences are now yours to face. It's devastating to realize that you took him for granted and allowed lust to lead you astray. Marriage is founded on trust, love, and commitment, and you shattered all of those vital elements. Mark deserves someone who values his trust and treats him with the respect he deserves. At this point, what you need to do is respect his decision. Allow him the space he needs, and give him the opportunity to move forward with his life. It's crucial for you to learn from this painful experience, to grow as a person. Cheating is never a solution to any problem in a relationship. It's time to accept responsibility for your actions, to face the consequences of your choices, and to commit to becoming a better version of yourself. As for the second story, fellow Redditors, I welcome you. I find myself in a perplexing situation and could genuinely use some guidance. Allow me to provide you with some context. I am a 34-year-old woman, married to my husband, who is 35, for the past 3 years. We've been together since our college days, which adds up to about a decade in total. Our relationship hit a rough patch after we got engaged, prompting us to take a break to assess our feelings. During this time, we agreed not to involve ourselves with other people. Here's where things took a dark turn. In the course of that 3-month break, I ended up dating and being intimate with a close friend who also happens to be friends with my husband. I am fully aware of how awful this sounds, but during that period, I genuinely believed our relationship was over and made some regrettable decisions. When the break ended, my husband and I reconciled. Strangely, I chose not to disclose my brief involvement with our mutual friend, deeming it irrelevant and devoid of any emotional attachment. Fast forward to the present day, I recently had a nightmare about the entire situation. This prompted me to ask my husband if he had been with someone else during our break. To my relief, he hadn't. However, he posed the same question to me, leading me to confess about my involvement with our mutual friend. I'll never forget the look of betrayal on his face. Now I find myself trapped in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, uncertain about how to navigate this complex situation. I find myself engulfed in a tidal wave of emotions, grappling with guilt, betrayal, and confusion. I'm uncertain if my actions qualify as cheating, and I'm utterly lost on how to confront this situation. My husband and I have long contended with trust issues, and now I fear that this might spell the demise of our relationship. I'm reaching out to you, Reddit, because I'm in dire need of objective advice. How should I navigate this intricate web of emotions and actions? Is there a path to redemption for our relationship, or is it doomed to unravel irreparably? I'm genuinely committed to making amends, but I'm unsure where to begin. Please help me find a way to navigate this messy situation. The affair stretched over a little more than 3 months, but as soon as my husband and I officially reconciled, I promptly ended things with the other person. I want to address the assumptions some may be making regarding our break. It was not initiated by me due to an ongoing involvement with the friend. That couldn't be further from the truth. The break was initiated because we had encountered several unresolved issues, and I believed it was necessary to address them before progressing our relationship further. I was already acquainted with the friend, and yes, we were talking, but nothing physical occurred until after I went on a break with my husband. During the break, the involvement with the friend became physical. Some comments have pointed out that I was emotionally attached to the friend before the break, essentially engaging in an emotional affair. At that time, I was in a committed long-term relationship, effectively engaged to my now husband. Despite this, I chose to date and be intimate with a mutual friend. It's crucial to acknowledge the gravity of this situation and the profound pain it has caused my husband. The emotional toll and turmoil this betrayal has stirred within him cannot be underestimated. I must confront my mistake and take full responsibility for my actions. The impact of what transpired during the break has undoubtedly left my husband feeling deeply betrayed, and his emotional struggle is entirely justified. If I genuinely want to salvage our relationship, it demands difficult conversations, vulnerability, and perhaps even professional intervention. Rebuilding trust is a challenging and lengthy process, but it's possible with genuine commitment from both parties. I understand the immense effort it will take, but I am willing to work through this. I appreciate your advice and well wishes.
My in-laws caught us completely off guard when they moved in without any prior notice. At first, I thought they were merely delivering a large package, but to my astonishment, they emerged from the front door, stating they had no intention of paying rent or doing any chores. They insisted that we take care of them and demanded the biggest room, expecting us to assist with their move. It was surreal. My father-in-law, Austin, and brother-in-law, Owen, had simply barged in and started giving orders about rearranging things. The situation was so absurd that I couldn't help but chuckle, finding humor in the midst of the chaos. With a grin, I reassured them, "It's totally fine," and promptly called my husband, knowing he would be home soon. I couldn't help but wonder how he would react to this unexpected mess, especially considering that the ones who had mocked me were his own family. As anticipated, my husband arrived home, visibly upset with Austin and Owen. However, he surprised everyone by showing them a document. I couldn't contain my amusement as I watched his father and brother's expressions change, understanding that they had no grounds to stay here without our consent. In the end, the tables turned, and it was I who moved out of the house. My name is Catherine Miller, a 34-year-old remote worker. Due to certain family circumstances, I opted for a job that allowed me to work from home, giving me the flexibility to manage household chores and explore new recipes whenever I pleased. I met my husband, Michael Miller, through a dating app during the peak of a flu outbreak. Despite his frequent business trips, Michael wanted us to live together so I wouldn't feel lonely. We fell in love quickly, and marriage was on our minds. However, my irregular periods made it difficult for us to conceive, leading to emotional struggles. Opening up to Michael brought us closer, and we resolved to face life's challenges together. Our peaceful life was disrupted when Michael's father, Austin Miller, called us, complaining about not receiving greetings from our end. Although Michael had reservations about meeting his father, we decided to visit his parents' home. His reluctance was evident as we prepared to go, his frown deepening with every step. Throughout the journey, Michael's displeasure was palpable. He remained silent, clearly indicating his desire to avoid the impending encounter. I wished I knew the reasons behind his aversion, but he chose not to share. Despite my curiosity, I respected his silence, hoping he would eventually open up and confide in me. As we approached his parents' house, we carried a box of pastries as a gesture of goodwill. Michael's tension was undeniable, reflecting the complex relationship he had with his father. I had anticipated receiving sarcastic remarks, but I mustered the courage and left the house. Stress often gave me stomach aches, a fact not lost on Michael, who looked at me with concern and asked, "Are you okay? Should we do this another time?" "I think I'm fine," I replied, attempting to steady my nerves. "It wouldn't be right if we didn't greet your father, right?" It was the same father who had complained over the phone, and there was an air about him that suggested he wouldn't forgive us easily. The situation felt more troublesome than anything else. Michael, too, seemed to sense the tension and was eager to drive, perhaps to keep himself distracted. I couldn't shake the feeling that there were deep-seated issues at his childhood home. Meeting such a father-in-law could be tiresome, but I never regretted choosing Michael. I cherished the kindness he showed me and his occasional clumsiness. It was these little things that meant the most. Lost in thought, we eventually arrived at Michael's childhood home, which was conveniently close to our apartment. It was within walking distance, just a short stroll away if we ever felt like it. As I entered his house, his father greeted me with a big smile. Michael, on the other hand, gave his father a slight glare as he stepped inside. From a room deeper inside the house, I could hear Michael's raised voice. "You can't just mooch off Dad because you're unemployed and stay at home all day. How old do you even think you are?" "Shut up. What I do isn't any of your business." Owen, Michael's brother, defiantly held his own. To sum up the argument, Owen had been living an unemployed lifestyle since his late 20s, without any valid reason like health issues. It was simply because he felt jobs didn't suit him, while Michael understood the desire for a job that suited one's preferences. It was frustrating to see Owen not even attempting to find one. Their father was no different, constantly bringing home different women and ending relationships time after time. Michael always said there was no way they could be happy living like that. "I'm not here to babysit the two of you. I came to announce that Catherine and I are getting married," Michael declared firmly. Yeah, got it. If you want to brag about being happy, do it somewhere else. I'm good if I can just live with Dad." Owen brushed off the confrontation, deeply engrossed in his video game. Annoyed by the sight, Michael was about to react when we realized his father was looming over us. "Catherine, huh? If you're going to marry Michael, you better be ready to take care of his family. Once you're married to Michael, we're family. You get that?" "While that might be true, I didn't think it was mandatory." "Well, that may be true. I don't think it's mandatory," I replied, trying to stand my ground. "What'd you just say, young lady? You've got some nerve. I'll teach you some respect for your elders." Suddenly, his father raised his voice, and I was snapped back to reality, taken aback. Michael quickly pulled my hand, and we managed to leave the house. Dread washed over me as his father, appearing more like a terrifying monster, began chasing us. There was something deeply unsettling about that family. The fear lingered, even as we attempted to choose an apartment. His father always seemed to beat us to it, deciding for us. To prevent such incidents from recurring, Michael and I decided we needed to move. Thanks to my job in web-related work, I had the flexibility to work from anywhere with just a computer. My job wasn't the issue, but Michael's was. While he enjoyed household chores, he also owned a carpentry business, often traveling for work. Consequently, I ended up handling most of the moving process. There was an inevitability to our situation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that his father and the jobless Owen might visit. Given my knack for bad premonitions turning true, all I could do was hope they wouldn't come. In the meantime, I proceeded with the moving arrangements, taking Michael's opinions into account. I wanted to get everything sorted before they potentially showed up at our house. Once the moving process was done, I was finally able to shift to working from home. There were still a few loose ends, including contacting a representative regarding a web video project I had discussed earlier. While I was engrossed in messaging and talking on the phone, I heard a knock on the front door. Michael usually didn't bother knocking. He would simply walk in. The unexpected visitor puzzled me. Could it be his father and Owen? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. As I contemplated this, a loud, aggressive voice echoed from behind the door. It was his father, Austin. Panic set in. Michael wasn't back yet, which meant I had to handle this situation alone. Perhaps talking to him would resolve things. I ended my call with the client and cautiously approached the front door. The relentless knocking only confirmed my suspicions. It had to be his father. Uncertain of his intentions, but determined to protect our peace, I mustered a polite greeting and opened the door slightly. Before I could react, Owen forcefully pushed the door open, dropping a large bag at the entrance with a satisfied grin. He theatrically collapsed onto a chair, exclaiming, "I'm exhausted." I asked Austin what was going on, and he explained, "We couldn't pay the mortgage on our place, so we sold it and decided to move. Naturally, we won't pay any rent or do any chores, so take care of us." With a self-centered air, both his father and Owen strolled into our apartment. Owen, lugging his baggage, scanned the rooms to decide where he would settle. Meanwhile, his father, after depositing his enormous bag in the living room, began to complain about the room's size. "Come on, this apartment is meant for 2 people, you know. If we're going to have 4 people living here, we might need to find another place." However, Michael and I had already chosen our next home, and our moving date was just around the corner. "I'm going to take the upstairs room," Owen declared, showing no consideration for the situation. "Catherine, can you tidy up this room for me? And haven't you put too much stuff in the living room? There's no space for us to even eat together." I was left utterly speechless by their audacity, as they said whatever pleased them without any regard for courtesy. Deciding that I needed to inform Michael about the situation, I was suddenly startled by the sound of someone punching a wall, most likely out of anger. However, the words that followed provided a small relief, indicating that I might not have to deal with these 2 any longer. Unfortunately, due to work circumstances, Michael couldn't return to the apartment. The burden of handling the situation fell upon me, and as a woman, facing 2 men alone felt unsafe. So, I decided to make a call for help. The person I called was a friend who had previously assisted both Michael and me with our moving preparations. She happened to live in a building constructed by Michael's company, and her name was Olivia Lewis. Olivia was a CEO who owned properties overseas. When I explained the situation to Olivia, she expressed her unease about the father and son in my home. Soon enough, they arrived at our apartment, arrogantly scattering their belongings everywhere. Despite the fact that Michael and I were the rightful owners of the apartment, with me being the leaseholder due to my remote work, they seemed oblivious to the reality. With a gracious smile, I told the 2 clueless men, "That's totally fine. We're moving out of this apartment anyway." His father, appearing desperate, clung to me. I couldn't hide my condescending look as I firmly stated, "Don't cling to me looking so pitiful. It's embarrassing." He was on the verge of tears, trying to reason. "It's a joke, right? Tell me it's a joke." I responded sternly, "It's not a joke, Austin. Michael and I decided this together. There's no way I'd joke about it now." The same man who had been smug about the living room just a while ago was now clinging to me, looking truly pitiable. Owen, puzzled by the scene between his father and me, came downstairs and couldn't believe what he was witnessing. "Dad, are you seriously trying to make a move on Michael's wife? Now that's just unbelievable," Owen remarked. I had a few choice words for Owen, who was making such comments. To begin with, as soon as he arrived at our place, I was infuriated by his audacity in searching for his own room in a house he hadn't even rented. Their actions were beyond my comprehension. If anyone should be saying unbelievable, it's my line. You folks moving into someone else's house is just unbelievable. You didn't even have a lease. What made you think you could just move in and live here? Realizing that I needed assistance in dealing with this situation, I decided to call Olivia, who held considerable authority as both the landlord of an apartment complex and its general manager. Olivia was a respected figure in the area, often referred to as the CEO due to her prominence. There was no way they could talk their way out of this once she arrived. Olivia soon arrived at the parking lot and entered the room. Olivia assessed the situation alongside me and the 2 men and seemed to grasp the core issue. She decided to contact Michael to address the matter. After a brief conversation with Michael, Olivia appeared to have resolved the issue. Her expression was dead serious as she inquired, "Did you handle the tax declaration after selling your house?" "No, not yet," I admitted. "That's odd. We can't lease you the apartment without that. Please ensure you've reported it correctly, and then we may proceed with this room," Olivia explained, demonstrating a meticulous approach. When dealing with individuals like the ones we were facing, legal knowledge was essential to have a fair conversation. Michael must have been well aware of his father's troublesome nature. His father had a reputation for being self-centered and engaging in extramarital affairs, a story Michael had shared with me before one of his business trips. Michael's mother had left their house after discovering his father's infidelity, and her departure left Michael feeling remorseful. She had even hugged Michael apologetically before leaving, expressing guilt for leaving him in such a household. Michael had then taken over all the household chores. However, his father's philandering behavior only worsened over time, while Owen kept jumping from one job to another before ultimately becoming unemployed around the age of 28. He took pride in receiving unemployment benefits and eventually withdrew from social interaction, feeling overwhelmed. Faced with the daunting task of taking care of Owen and their father, Michael decided to marry me. They were diligent in paying utility bills, but occasionally skipped out on insurance premiums and other minor fees. Michael even worried about being unable to complete the house loan payments. Realizing that they weren't responsible adults, Michael eventually decided it was time to move out. When his father began arguing with Olivia, Michael sent me a message instructing me to intervene. I stepped in between his father and Olivia and calmly stated, "Excuse me, but Michael and I are moving out tomorrow due to some reasons." His father seemed taken aback and asked, "Hey, hold on. What's going on?" I didn't hear about this from Michael. Shouldn't he inform his father when he's moving? I replied, "He said he didn't want to talk to you about it. He thinks it's best to live separately from a philandering, selfish person like you and Owen." To emphasize my point, I showed his father our conversation on WhatsApp, where Michael had voiced his dissatisfaction with his father. Although I had only been a listener, I had gathered a very negative impression of their past actions. Even during our brief interactions, I couldn't help but find it peculiar for his father and Owen to move into our apartment. Based solely on that fact, I had doubts about the reliability of this father and son duo. Olivia interjected during his father's grumbling, explaining, "Even if Catherine leaves, if you, Austin, don't declare the sale of your previous house, you won't be able to rent an apartment in the future." Austin, appearing somewhat baffled, responded, "But I have money on hand. Isn't that enough?" Olivia clarified, "No, it's not just about selling the house and being done, Austin. If you don't declare it, there are penalties. You'll be the one at a loss. Are you okay with that?" Austin reluctantly agreed, acknowledging the point. Olivia's reasoning made sense in the context of real estate transactions. If he had sold the previous house, he would eventually need to report it to the local authorities. Perhaps he hadn't even reported it to the real estate agency, which would be suspicious. Given their lack of research and understanding, it was evident that Austin and Owen had moved into our place without considering the necessary procedures. As I examined the documents Olivia had brought, it was apparent that they didn't comprehend any of it. I had been fielding questions from Austin and Owen about the documents and couldn't help but wonder how long it would take for them to grasp the situation. Michael and I had resided in this apartment for quite some time, and we had taken the initiative to research the necessary procedures. That's why everything went so smoothly for us. There were always pros and cons to everything, and it seemed like common sense to check things out before making such a significant move. Yet they had moved into our place without giving it any thought, which I found highly questionable. The ones acting recklessly were Austin and Owen. In that moment, Olivia decided to issue a warning to the two of them. "Please don't assume you can just move into this apartment immediately. I'll check everything thoroughly and get back to you. Then we can decide on the next steps," Olivia said firmly. Owen seemed to understand, sitting quietly and listening. To be on the safe side, I chose to spend the night at my parents' house as the apartment was going to be rented out the next day. I didn't want to sleep with two guys, especially ones who lacked common sense. Considering the risk of getting involved in some mess, I decided to let Michael's father and his brother stay in my apartment. Olivia, whom I got along with at the real estate agency, had suggested it too, indicating there might have been genuine issues. If anything went wrong, it could ruin our moving plans with Michael. I entrusted the situation to Olivia, the real estate agent, and informed Michael to proceed with the preparations for our new place. I stayed in touch with Olivia to check on how the two were doing. Based on her recommendation, the apartment was rented to Michael's father and Owen for just a few days. Olivia needed to verify if they had properly completed the necessary procedures at the real estate agency, and if they had been paying their taxes regarding the house they claimed to have sold. She also had to contact the associated real estate firm. It turned out that not only had they neglected post-sale procedures, but they also hadn't paid their taxes. Moreover, Olivia reported them to the police, suspecting they might have run off with just the sale money, hinting at a potential scam. To be safe, Olivia decided to inform Michael's father and Owen, who were staying in the apartment. If false information was provided to the real estate company, penalties would surely be enforced. They would not only have to pay the taxes, but also face potential penalties. I wondered how much money would be left in the end. According to what I heard from Olivia, it seemed that it might even go into the negative. The reason was that they had only consulted one real estate agency, which had good reviews and word-of-mouth recommendations. They believed the estimate would be the same no matter which agency they asked. Another task they had neglected was the property transfer process. In simple terms, it involved changing the property's name from Michael's father to the new owner. If there was any outstanding mortgage on the house, it should have been paid from the sale. But as expected, they hadn't paid it, turning the situation into a case with interrogations regarding the amount due and possible fraud. What was particularly bad was Michael's father insisting he knew nothing about it. As for Owen, he couldn't return to his old home, and he lost our apartment. He was forced to find a job with housing provided. However, he only had experience being a shut-in and living off his parents. Eventually, my parents took him in, but they made it clear that once he found a job with housing, he had to move out. With some guidance from my parents, it seemed he might secure a job. I hoped Michael's father and Owen would learn to live responsibly. Meanwhile, Michael and I decided to relocate overseas. Michael's hard work had been recognized, and he was offered a project abroad in Spain. However, both of us were Americans who couldn't speak Spanish. We diligently studied, trying to learn basic conversation skills. I wanted to be able to hold everyday conversations as much as possible. More than anything, it was my first time going on a business trip abroad, so there was a part of me that was really excited. Michael's job was overseas, so he started looking at potential homes for us. He kept me updated through messages and calls, always trying to ensure I wasn't anxious. Today, from the airport, I received a call from a worried Michael who was about to fly to Spain. "Are you okay? I know it's been hard because of my dad and brother. I'm totally fine. I'm more excited about living abroad with you," I reassured him. "Good to hear," Michael said, his voice filled with relief. His relief made me happy too. We were now free from those two, and we were going to enjoy our lives. To achieve that, we would keep studying, learn new things, and adapt to our new life. Everything was going to be all right. And so, our life in Spain began. A child came into our lives, and our daily routine changed as a family of 3. We cherished our happiness and continued to live strongly every day.
Since we'll be leaving this place today, could you please move out? We'll also pay the $473 monthly loan. Now that my daughter is coming, we no longer need you. Okay, well then please take care of everything from now on. Even though we had supported our in-laws so much, they easily shifted their trust to the younger sister. As I reached the entrance, packing my belongings, I told them something very important. "Oh, by the way, it seems there's a misunderstanding. The monthly loan repayment is..." As I said that, their faces turned pale in shock. My name is Emily, a 35-year-old office worker. I've been married to Tom for 3 years. We met through a mutual friend who believed we'd be perfect for each other. This friend's intuition was spot on. We were drawn to each other from our first conversation. Tom also felt the same, and we began dating. We continued the relationship smoothly, and around 2 years later, he proposed to me. I was so happy as I loved him deeply. Both our families agreed to our marriage, and we had a wonderful wedding attended by many. We then went on a honeymoon and began our life together as a married couple. We both worked, so we shared household chores. Tom had lived alone for a long time and could cook, which was a huge help. Even when I was late from work, Tom helped me and started cooking so we could have dinner soon after. We cooperated in all household tasks, and life felt peaceful and stress-free. We were grateful for each other's company. In the blink of an eye, 3 years passed, and our bond remained as strong as when we were newlyweds. However, a significant event occurred. Tom's father fell ill suddenly, and we rushed to the hospital. "Dad, are you okay?" Tom, Emily, thank you for coming. Sorry for causing you concern. It seems I overexerted myself." He had been a workaholic, often working long hours, and as he aged, the stress of those years took a toll on him. "For now, I'll undergo some tests and wait for the results." "I see." Tom and I were anxious, but more than that, my mother-in-law was quite upset. For the mother-in-law who had always supported her husband as a housewife, it was understandable that she was upset when her partner, the mainstay of the family, was suddenly in mortal danger. "Mother-in-law, are you all right?" "Yes, somehow." We cared deeply for both of them and began visiting them more frequently, trying to be as supportive as possible. After a week, the father-in-law's test results came out. Although he was released from the hospital, there were concerns about a recurrence. Realizing that they might not handle another emergency, Tom proposed something. "Hey, what if we live together with my parents?" The proposal was expected. If my parents were in the same situation, I'd want to live with them too. "Of course, I'm okay with that. Let's discuss it with them right away," I said. "Thank you, Emily," Tom replied. We quickly presented the idea to our in-laws. "Live together? We want to be a burden," said my mother-in-law, wiping away her tears. "It's not a bother at all. Emily and I are worried about both of you," I reassured them. "Thank you, both of you." Music. Our in-laws, teary-eyed, gratefully accepted. They must have been quite anxious. We promptly moved in with them. My mother-in-law, knowing that both of us worked, took the lead in the household chores. Thanks to her, we could focus on our jobs. The father-in-law retired early and spent his days resting at home, which improved his health. We all got along wonderfully without any issues, and life was joyous. However, our in-laws made a certain proposal. "I've been thinking about this for a while. How would you feel about building a new 2-family house?" my father-in-law said. "Huh? It's a bit small for 4 adults to live in this house, and if Tom and Emily have children in the future, it'll be even smaller." Considering the future, I've been thinking of building a bigger house where we can live comfortably for the rest of our lives. However, it's not something we can afford with just my savings. We will need to discuss and decide together. Tom and I were surprised by the proposal, but we thought it wasn't a bad idea. While the current in-laws' house isn't too small, it's not particularly spacious or comfortable either. Leaving here long-term might lead to stress building up between us. Perhaps buying a new house where everyone can live comfortably is a good idea. After discussing with Tom for a while, we decided to go along with the father-in-law's proposal. Subsequently, the 4 of us went to real estate agencies to look at various properties. We considered making it barrier-free for our in-laws and ensuring there are plenty of rooms if children come along. Ideally, it should be in a safe area close to both a hospital and a train station and have easy access to grocery stores. Given everyone's requirements, it seemed like it might be pricey. However, if we're going to live here for the rest of our lives, we don't want to compromise too much. Each family member shared the same sentiment, so fueled by determination, we decided to build our dream house, no matter the cost. After some time, our new home was finally completed. The exterior and interior were both new and beautiful, and just gazing upon it filled our hearts with joy. "This is really amazing. I can't be sick anymore. I want to stay healthy and live here for as long as possible," my mother-in-law said. The in-laws seemed pleased, and my husband and I were equally excited. "This is the house that will be with us for our entire lives. When we have kids, I want to play catch in the garden and have barbecues, I exclaimed. That sounds great. Let's make lots of family memories here, my husband added. We were overflowing with excitement and joy. Living in the house turned out to be truly comfortable, and it felt like the pinnacle of happiness. Being in a comfortable home made me even more enthusiastic about my work. Subsequently, my work went very smoothly. Both my public and private lives were fulfilling, and I genuinely felt grateful for buying this house. The months passed in the blink of an eye, and 2 years had passed in this house. We continued to have a good relationship with our in-laws as always, and we believed that the days ahead would be filled with happiness. However, at least this place for life in our new home, something unexpected happened. It was when my sister-in-law and her husband visited our new house. While this really is a nice house, it's not fair that only you guys get to live here, she said. What are you talking about? We discussed and decided to buy this house with our parents, I replied. But I can't help but feel envious. When we were still living in a cheap winter, it feels like you're living beyond your means, she retorted. My sister-in-law often visited our house during holidays and always expressed her envy. Every time she would accuse us of being unfair. We've been paying the mortgage for this house, and it's quite a hefty amount every month. We're living within our means, earning enough to pay for this house, so there's no reason for her to complain. If we were to live here with the in-laws, it would be so much fun, don't you think? What can you even know about the market for this house? My husband and I exchanged a glance. The sister-in-law probably just blurted out without giving it much thought. However, her careless words started to move my in-laws' hearts. It would be lovely if Canna could move and live here together, my father-in-law said. Yes, it would liven things up, my mother-in-law added. Hey, what are you two talking about? Haven't we been living together all this while? I said, trying to lighten the atmosphere. Oh, come on, I was just saying, the sister-in-law replied. Exactly, there's no need to panic, right? Ha ha ha, my husband added, attempting to diffuse the tension. While the in-laws tried to brush it off, it was evident that they were enticed by the idea of living with the sister-in-law. They seemed to have a particular affection for her. Even Mercer, their pet, went for her. She was a beauty with delicate features, looking like a doll since her childhood. 4 years younger than Tom, she was born when the in-laws were older, making them dote on her even more. This pampering had led her to become quite spoiled, and Tom had to deal with her demanding nature. Having heard all this from Tom, I was always wary of my sister-in-law. For a while after we got married, Tom and I were both caught off guard because she didn't seem to be causing us any trouble. However, recently, she had been increasingly eyeing our new house. Oh, Emily, you're back. Then I'll be leaving now, she said one day. Huh, I wish you'd stay a bit longer, I replied, trying to be polite, but hoping she would leave. But Tom and Emily might find it inconvenient, she said, pretending to be considerate. I don't think it's a nuisance, I said, trying to hide my irritation. You might say that, but it's evident in your eyes and behavior, she retorted. Unwanted guests should leave quickly. See you, Mom and Dad, she called out as she left. When the sister-in-law left, the in-laws were visibly upset. They looked as if they wished she had stayed longer. Even though they didn't voice their feelings, their faces and attitudes spoke volumes. I often felt out of place, retreating to my room after work to avoid the growing tension that lingered in our home. When Tom came home, we'd cautiously make our way to the living room for dinner, but the atmosphere around the dinner table became increasingly strained. Long silences would hang in the air, and it was clear something was amiss. Tom, too, sensed the change and began to suspect that the cause of our troubles was his sister. As our relationship with the in-laws deteriorated, the sister-in-law finally made her move. One holiday, Tom and I returned from our morning shopping to find unfamiliar shoes at the entrance. We exchanged glances, perplexed, and then his mother-in-law approached us from the living room. You're finally back. We need to talk, she said, her tone unusually stern. As we entered the living room, there sat the sister-in-law and her husband. Ah, you're finally here, she said, addressing us casually. Kana, what's going on? From today, we'll be living here, so please leave, she declared, catching us off guard. What? Tom and I were taken aback by her sudden announcement. What is she thinking, moving in today? Hold on, it's ridiculous to say that all of a sudden. It's not sudden. We've discussed this with Mom and Dad for a long time, she responded confidently. Kai and I will take care of everyone. I'll handle the housework and even care for you when needed. Please rely on us, Mom and Dad. With our daughter here, we don't need you anymore. A daughter-in-law who doesn't do housework or have children is no match for Kana. I was deeply hurt by their words. Seeing my shocked face, the sister-in-law smirked. We'll pay the $473 monthly loan. Okay, she said, as if it would make everything all right. Huh? $473? I stammered, unable to believe what I was hearing. It's a great deal to live in such a nice house for that. Tom and I exchanged dumbfounded glances. It became clear that the in-laws were already planning to kick us out. After such treatment, we couldn't continue living there. Is that so? I managed to say. But we can't move out immediately. Could you give us at least a week? We need to find a new place. Fine, his mother-in-law said, her tone indifferent. Ah, you must be looking forward to living with Kana and her husband from today. As the in-laws looked disappointed, the sister-in-law and her husband were extremely happy that we decided to leave. Calm down, Mom and Dad. The house isn't going anywhere. I'm looking forward to a week from now, she chimed in, her voice dripping with satisfaction. While the in-laws and the sister-in-law's family were thrilled to drive us out, Tom and I seriously reconsidered co-living with such people. We quickly arranged to view rental properties and moved out within a week. On the day we were leaving, I made it clear. Please take care of everything from now on. Don't ever get involved with us or come to this house again. Their words were harsh, especially considering how much we had supported them. Yet now we could finally live comfortably with Mom and Dad in our new home. It felt like a dream. As I gathered our belongings and approached the entrance, I shared an important piece of information. Oh, by the way, it seems there's a misunderstanding about the monthly mortgage payments. It's $1,825 every month, okay? Make sure you understand that. What? They exclaimed in shock, their faces turning pale all at once. Hold on a second, isn't the loan just $473 a month? They protested. You misunderstood, didn't you? This house is under our father's name, so the loan is contractually agreed to be paid off through a debit from Dad's account. Emily and I were planning to live in this house for the rest of our lives, so we told him he wouldn't have to pay. We were bearing all the costs. So I was transferring $473, and Emily was transferring $1,352 to our father's account every month. It turned out Father had only remembered the monthly transfers into his account. Moreover, Emily and I split the living expenses equally. Our parents probably never thoroughly checked the costs and assumed it wasn't a significant amount. What? No way. We can't pay $1,825 a month. We can't even cover the living expenses on top of that. How can Emily afford to contribute so much? Tom exclaimed. I don't know how you perceive me, but I'm a department head at a major corporation. I earn quite a lot, I interjected. What? Emily earns much more than I do, Tom said, explaining to the in-laws. The in-laws looked shocked. Well, we've decided to cut ties with you, so it's up to you to support our parents from now on, Father said firmly. No way, Emily, Tom, wait. We were wrong. Let's live peacefully together like before. Okay, Mother pleaded. What? Mom and Dad, are you planning to abandon us? You guys can repay the loan, can't you? If that's the case, shouldn't you live with those who can? I argued. That's not fair. Dad told me the loan was only about $473. That's why we came here. We've already canceled our previous house, the sister-in-law protested. That's not my problem. Isn't this mess because you wanted to move in with us in the first place? Tom said. Right, your husband earns very little, doesn't he? But you always said family was more important than money and pampered me. When our livelihood is at stake, all of that doesn't matter, I added, pointing out their hypocrisy. The quarrel between the in-laws and the sister-in-law was unbearable to watch. Well, we're leaving, I declared, and with that Tom and I left the house and moved into our rented room. Despite numerous messages from the in-laws, we ignored them all. According to our neighbors, the in-laws and the sister-in-law's family had no choice but to live together. However, they couldn't pay the loan and eventually had to let go of the house. When they sold the house, a considerable debt remained. Even after using the father-in-law's early retirement benefits for repayment, they still fell short. Eventually, they had to settle for a small apartment and work multiple jobs to repay their debt. Apparently, the sister-in-law's husband didn't want the burden to fall on him, so he ran away. If only the in-laws had continued living peacefully with us, they wouldn't have faced these hardships. But again, it's none of our concern now. On the other hand, Tom and I found our rented apartment much cozier than anticipated. We planned to stay here for a while and save money. We lived happily, watching our savings grow at an incredible rate. We believed it was essential to save as much as we could for the future while enjoying occasional luxuries. Our aim was a happy life together in the years to come.
If you can't give me a grandchild, then we should consider divorce, Jones declared. I hesitated for a moment before responding, Fine, I got it. But just as he was about to finalize his decision, I surprised him with the news. I am pregnant. You see, I'm a homemaker in my 30s, living with my husband Jones, who works in an office. Our love story began when I was working at a food-related company. Over time, we spoke many times regarding transactions, and I found myself falling for his occasional smiles. So I decided to take the initiative and propose a relationship. However, when I proposed, Jones rejected me saying, I'm sorry, I appreciate your feelings, but I already have a girlfriend. Yet destiny had other plans. A month later, he approached me, admitting, I broke up with my girlfriend, and I would like to be with you. Apparently, since my confession, he couldn't stop thinking about me, which eventually led to his breakup with his girlfriend. I felt guilty for causing their breakup, but Jones reassured me with a smile, saying, Don't worry about it, it probably wouldn't have lasted long anyway. His kindness saved our budding relationship. After 3 years of being together, we got married. At that time, Jones expressed his desire to have children after marriage and asked if I could stay at home to support him and our future family. I wasn't particularly attached to my job at a somewhat toxic company, so I decided to quit and become a full-time homemaker. The transition from a working woman to a homemaker turned out to be more challenging than I expected. But I didn't mind because our newly life was sailing smoothly, and I was constantly brimming with happiness. We also had the advantage of Jones's family living just a 10-minute walk from our apartment. Initially, I worried about frequent visits and potential issues with his parents, but my fears were unfounded. They were incredibly kind and helpful, always ready to explain things to me gently and kindly. Despite our childlessness, they never complained, often telling me, You are even dearer to us than a grandchild, and we only have boys in our family. We always wanted a daughter. Please let us pamper you like our real daughter. I had developed a strong bond with Jones's mother, Carol, and I trusted his father, Tom, who might be a man of few words, but he was incredibly reliable. However, this heartwarming relationship lasted only for the first few years. A few years into our marriage, the once kind attitude of Jones's parents began to change drastically. Gradually, Tom became even more reserved, and Carol underwent such a transformation that I began to suspect a dual personality within her. Perhaps this harsh version of her was her true self. To quantify her change, if she was once at a +100 before, Now she seemed to be at -100. That's how harshly she treated me. Living nearby, she started visiting our house frequently, especially when Jones was absent, nagging me incessantly and urging me to show her the face of my grandchild. According to her, it was a wife's duty. She would rush me to have a child. Although not long ago, she used to say, "Children are a gift from heaven. You don't have to try hard. You'll conceive naturally when the time comes, so don't rush." However, her attitude had taken a complete U-turn. She began to pressure me by mentioning other families, saying things like, "The family over there recently had a baby, and the woman next door is pregnant. What about you?" But no matter how much she pressed me for a grandchild, it was all meaningless if Jones wasn't ready. Despite his initial desire for children at the start of our marriage, a year into it, he had completely lost interest. Even my attempts to initiate intimacy were met with rejection. He would decline, saying he was tired, or dismiss me saying, "Don't interrupt my gaming." When I tried to explain this to Carol, she didn't seem to understand and continued pressuring me to have a child, increasing my stress day by day. Unable to endure her relentless attacks any longer, I finally confided in Jones about the pressure I was facing to have a grandchild. He grumbled his response, saying, "I don't think we need to rush this, you know." Despite his reluctance, he agreed to increase our intimate time together as much as possible. Despite our joint efforts as a couple, getting pregnant seemed elusive. Moreover, throughout this time, Carol kept hurling insults at us, blaming our lack of success on our supposed lack of effort. At times, I suspected that the accumulated stress caused by her constant pressure might be making it even harder to conceive. Unable to withstand her relentless pressure any longer, I reached my breaking point. As a couple, we finally decided to undergo fertility treatments, hoping it would solve our struggles with conception. However, relief was short-lived as a new issue arose, one that centered around Jones. Ever since we embarked on the fertility treatment journey, he began to grow distant, retreating to his room to play video games immediately after returning from work, ignoring my attempts at conversation. Initially, I could tolerate his behavior, but it worsened over time. Jones became increasingly irritable, lashing out over small expenses related to my hobby, and unloading his work stress on me. Whenever I tried to defend myself, he would quickly lose his temper, emphasizing his role as the provider and labeling me a freeloader. No matter how many times I reminded him that I had quit my job to fulfill his wishes, he remained unyielding. One day, when he should have been going to work, I discovered he had quit without informing me. When I questioned him about it, he dismissively replied that it was none of my business. I felt a mix of disgust and helplessness. While I believed we could manage financially for a while through unemployment benefits and dipping into our savings, the fact that he showed no interest in finding a new job stressed me out immensely. With Jones spending his days at home, his main activities revolving around gaming and occasional trips to the convenience store, our face-to-face interactions increased significantly. However, instead of fostering affectionate moments, this newfound time together only intensified our arguments. Our discussions became strained, and gradually, we stopped talking altogether. I found myself questioning the purpose of continuing this married life. The once strong bond between us seemed to be eroding, and the realization slowly settled in that our marriage might be reaching its breaking point. I began contemplating an escape from the dismal situation. One day, utterly fed up with Jones idling away his time, playing games at home like a child, I confronted him. "You're not a kid. Stop playing games all the time and start looking for a job," I admonished him sternly. His response caught me off guard. "Oh, by the way, my mom told me that if we can't have a baby, we should get a divorce," he said casually. To my surprise, I felt a surge of gratitude towards Carol, something I never anticipated. After all, I was pregnant. I had discovered this during a recent checkup, planning to tell him that very night. However, now it seemed like the right decision not to disclose the news. With newfound determination, I said, "Okay, got it." I retrieved the already filled-out divorce papers from a drawer and handed them to him. He seemed taken aback, clearly not expecting me to agree to the divorce, let alone produce ready-to-sign papers. He stuttered and froze on the spot, his usual domineering attitude nowhere to be seen. He appeared dumbfounded. Though he seemed on the verge of saying something, the weight of his mother's words weighed heavily on him. Eventually, he reluctantly signed the divorce papers, continuously sneaking glances at me. Later, we gathered to discuss matters like property division. In reality, we didn't have much in terms of assets to worry about. While he had previously complained about my spending habits, it turned out he was the one with the more reckless financial behavior. He not only played games at home, but also spent significant amounts of money at game centers, depleting his finances. We had no savings or assets to split, and Jones realized this with growing dismay. Despite this, he pointed to a passbook with considerable savings, suggesting we divide that as well. However, I informed him that this savings account was not subject to property division. This is the savings I accumulated before our marriage, so it is not part of property division, I explained calmly. His face paled even more. He then tried to claim rights over the condo we lived in. Unfortunately for him, the condo was in my name, and I had already put it up for sale. "You can't live here anymore. It would be a nuisance, so please leave immediately," I said with a smile. Besides, I thought this condo would become too small in the future, so I've been saving up for a new home, I added, watching his disbelief as I calmly asserted my independence. Saving money had always been my hobby, even when I had a regular job before marrying Jones. I had managed to save a significant amount, which I used to purchase this condo during a period of rapid advancement in my career. As a result, I owned substantial property. Even with the funds from selling the condo, I could afford to build a decent house downtown. Of course, all these assets were acquired during my single days, making them exempt from the current property division. It appeared my husband was unaware of this, as he seemed to believe he would be entitled to half of my assets. Upon realizing he wouldn't be part of the asset division, he was in a state of shock. We continued discussing, but he couldn't recover from his shock. With little left to discuss, the conversation ended swiftly. I submitted the divorce papers at the city office, and our divorce was finalized without a hitch. A few months later, I returned to my parents' home, where I received their unwavering support during the birth of my child. I safely delivered a healthy baby boy whom I named Ethan, a name borrowed from the Bible. Now, I spent my days contentedly with my loving child and parents. Of course, I hadn't informed Jones about our child, fearing Carol's interference if she found out. Meanwhile, Jones, who was evicted from the condo, retreated to his parents' home, but seemed to have become a recluse due to the shock of the easy agreement to the divorce. Occasionally, when he ventured out, his appearance seemed so suspicious that he often attracted the attention of law enforcement, making his situation quite pitiful. Later, I heard that he had quit his job due to interpersonal relationship issues. Apparently, he had a contentious attitude even at the office, especially disliked by female employees, leading to his isolation. Unable to cope, he abruptly quit one day. Perhaps he had always been that way, only showing kindness in front of me, a deceptive facade. 3 years later, I worked as the manager of a craft store, and it became a regular haunt for me. Around that time, the store owner approached me with an unexpected proposition. "I'm getting old and thinking of retiring. If it's all right with you, would you like to take over this store?" Considering my parents' active help with childcare, I had ample free time. The idea of having a job to keep myself occupied seemed appealing. Besides, declining the offer would inconvenience many regular customers, so I accepted without hesitation. As I was serving one of the occasional regular customers that day, I received an unexpected visit from Carol and Jones. Their thinly veiled flattery about the store irritated me. "Well, what brings you here?" I inquired. Carol mumbled something incomprehensible, eventually demanding, "Give my grandchild back to me." Evidently, she had learned about my child's birth and was contemplating making the child her heir. "Why did you keep it a secret?" "We were already in the process of divorcing," Jones accused, clearly agitated. "I kept quiet because I wanted the divorce. I knew you both would do anything to prevent it if you found out I was pregnant," I shot back, glaring at them. Carol persisted, insisting that I return her grandchild, emphasizing the 3 years we had spent together. Her demand left me utterly flabbergasted. Just then, my parents and Ethan entered the scene, sensing the tension. They asked, "What's the matter? Is there a problem?" It appeared that they hurried over after receiving a message from a regular customer. Spotting Ethan holding hands with my parents, Carol approached him, cooing, "Oh, how cute. He looks just like Jones when he was a child." "Look, I'm your grandma." I attempted to intervene, but Ethan, with surprising determination, declared, "I only have one grandma," and hugged my mother. Consequently, my mother politely asked Carol to leave. However, Jones attempted to forcibly take Ethan away from my parents, shouting, "Just give the kid to my mother." I stood in front of him, trying to protect Ethan, but my physical strength was no match for his. I was easily pushed aside. Jones was inches away from grabbing Ethan's arm when, out of nowhere, my father executed a perfect shoulder throw, sending Jones flying into the air. I looked up in astonishment to see my father, a skilled police officer who had even competed in national championships during his student days. Jones, completely unaware of my father's abilities, could only stare in pain and shock. My father, unfazed, said, "If you intend to bother my child and grandchild any further, I'm ready to take necessary actions. What do you want to do?" He showed his police badge to Carol, who turned pale, and they both hurried away. I never found out what happened to Carol and Jones after that, and frankly, I didn't want to know. Several years later, Ethan began aspiring to become a police officer, inspired by my father's courage and skills. "When I grow up, I'm going to be a police officer too, so I can protect Mom," he declared. Under my father's guidance, Ethan diligently worked on his studies, and his martial arts skills became unbeatable among his peers. I plan to continue watching over my wonderfully grown son, grateful for the support and protection my father had provided. Thank you for watching this video until the end. If you found the content relatable, please consider leaving a positive rating and a comment.
Saying that I was content with my husband, Nick, would be an immense understatement. I had married the love of my life, and even my mother-in-law, who lived with us, was wonderful. Despite Nick's busy schedule as a manager, he always made time for me, and my relationship with my mother-in-law was smooth. One day, while discussing inheritance matters with my mother-in-law, I mentioned that I had received my parents' shares, which amounted to a significant sum. Her reaction was unexpected. She grew silent and questioned why I wanted it so early. I explained it was Nick's wish for me to have it now. This revelation seemed to disturb her, and she suggested I review our prenuptial agreement. Confused, I confronted Nick, who tried to brush off the situation. However, when I pressed him further, his demeanor shifted, and I sensed a hint of panic in his voice. Determined to unravel the truth, I sought an explanation from my mother-in-law. Reluctantly, she confessed that she had discovered documents in Nick's home office outlining a prenup that significantly favored him, contrary to what I had signed. Shocked, I confronted Nick, who promised to show me the prenup the next day. But when he failed to produce it, my suspicions deepened. During his absence on a business trip, I couldn't shake off my suspicions. Driven by a desire for clarity, I decided to search his office discreetly. After days of searching, I finally found our prenuptial agreement hidden away, raising more questions than answers. Rage coursed through me as I pored over the document. According to this new version of our prenup, most of my properties would be his in the event of a divorce. I was utterly incredulous. The prenup I had signed with Nick, the one my lawyer and I had carefully reviewed, was nothing like this. It had outlined fair terms, where we retained rights to our personal properties and shares. Nick had seemed completely fine with it. I couldn't fathom how he had orchestrated this deceit behind my back. I immediately called my lawyer from back then, hoping for a solution. However, he seemed as clueless as I was, leaving me feeling utterly hopeless. Frustration and stress consumed me. Aimlessly pacing around the office, I stumbled upon a necklace in one of the drawers, unmistakably Molly's, a custom design I had gifted her for her birthday. My heart plummeted. Trying not to jump to conclusions, I called her. She explained she was visiting her parents and wouldn't be back for 2 days. I hung up and rushed to her house, my dread escalating as I saw Nick's shoes next to hers at the door. Inside, I confronted Molly, my voice laced with fury, demanding Nick to reveal himself. Both of them stood before me, guilt etched across their faces. They began to apologize, but their insincerity was palpable. My husband and my best friend desperately spun excuses, their lies struggling to find any semblance of believability. I had waited until their feeble attempts to cover up their betrayal ceased. Holding the prenuptial agreement in my trembling hands, I confronted them. I demanded an explanation from Nick, his initial shock quickly transforming into composed denial. He insisted that the document I held was the original one. Refusing to be deceived again, I stood my ground, threatening legal action against him for altering the prenup. Nick scoffed, dismissing my threats, claiming there was no proof of the fabricated version. Realizing I needed legal expertise, I resolved to find a knowledgeable attorney to fight back. My gaze shifted to Molly, who attempted to leave discreetly. I erupted in fury, accusing her of betrayal. In a moment of satisfaction, I slapped Nick hard. But he retaliated, blaming me for his deceitful plans. He asserted he intended to divorce me while preserving my feelings by keeping everything else intact. His manipulative words twisted the truth, making me question my own judgment. The betrayal cut deep. These were two of the people I trusted most, and their collusion left me feeling nauseous. As I processed the shock, Molly's son's cries echoed from another room. Dread consumed me as I confronted Molly, asking if Nick was the baby's father. Neither of them could meet my eyes, confirming my worst fears. A year ago, when Molly announced her pregnancy, I had supported her unconditionally. Nick had been there for her too, seemingly out of kindness. Now the pieces fell into place, revealing a devastating truth. Returning home, uncontrollable tears welled up. I found solace in the embrace of my mother-in-law, who stood by me as I poured out my heart. Sharing the entire ordeal with her, I realized the depth of the betrayal. I contemplated whether delving into the prenup had been worth it. Unearthing this web of deceit had shattered my world, leaving me questioning everything. I find myself utterly lost, unsure of how to proceed or whom to trust. It has become incredibly difficult to place my faith in people. I am immensely thankful for the suggestions and advice many of you have given me. Nick didn't return home for an entire week, and truthfully, it was probably for the best. Both my mother-in-law and I were prepared to kick him out if he did. Every day, I grew more restless, haunted by thoughts of the prenuptial agreement. Taking your advice to heart, I reached out to a lawyer who happened to be Molly's ex and one of the most promising up-and-coming attorneys I knew. He hadn't been available when we drafted the prenup, or I certainly would have chosen him. The lawyer explained the complexities of the situation, suggesting various ways to resolve it. Ultimately, he proposed that convincing Nick to nullify the prenup was the best course of action. However, when I confronted Nick in his office, his response was unexpected. He professed his love for Molly and his desire to provide for their child. I was dumbfounded. If he cared so deeply for them, why did he need my money? My persistence in questioning him only led to threats. He even went as far as to threaten my job, exploiting his connections with my boss, who happened to be his close friend. In that moment, it was as if I didn't recognize him anymore. He had transformed into someone manipulative and cunning. I realized that divorcing him would mean losing most of my property, a prospect that left me feeling trapped. While I wasn't well versed in the legal intricacies, my lawyer mentioned that the agreement might be considered invalid if the property division was excessively unfair. Yet the agreement specified most of my properties, albeit with a certain entitlement for me. Despite this, it still felt profoundly unjust, even if it might appear ordinary in a courtroom setting. For now, I chose to back down, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Several days later, I received a call from Nick's secretary, requesting a meeting. We met at a cafe, where she wasted no time getting to the point. Nick was involved with my boss, and he had threatened me using her as leverage. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Her unwarranted hostility towards me finally made sense. It was incomprehensible to believe that he was juggling multiple relationships simultaneously. Fortunately, the secretary provided me with photos as evidence of their secret affair. Armed with proof, I confronted Nick immediately. His face paled, sweat beading on his forehead. He lashed out, blaming me for ruining his life. But I cut him off, threatening to show the photos to Molly unless he agreed to modify the prenuptial agreement. Faced with no other choice, he begrudgingly complied, though his fury was palpable. In the following week, we meant to revise our prenup agreement. Nick seethed with anger throughout the process, his rage evident to anyone present. When Molly saw her ex with me, she seemed genuinely surprised. Clearly, she hadn't anticipated seeing him after breaking things off upon learning about her pregnancy. After the prenup was successfully modified, I wasted no time. I filed for divorce, ending the toxic relationship that had left me broken and betrayed. Thank you, everyone, for your supportive messages. I want to share an update with you all. I've purchased an apartment and regained ownership of all my properties. The alimony was eliminated, a decision we both agreed upon. Most importantly, I've finally separated from Nick, and it feels liberating. He was involved with Molly for a while, but their relationship soared after she discovered him with my boss. In the aftermath, I resigned from my job and found a better position at a different company. On a personal note, I've started a relationship with my lawyer, Molly, and things are going quite well. It seems that karma works its magic after all. Regarding my relationship with Chris's children, Eric, 17, and Alice, 15, it has always been respectful and caring. While they refer to me as their mother figure to others, they prefer not to use the title mom when we talk privately or in front of other relatives. I've never insisted on the label, valuing our bond more than a title. However, this became an issue with my mother-in-law. She persistently pressured me, believing I should be called Mom by the kids. Despite my attempts to explain the distinction between being a mother figure and the title itself, she continued to push the matter aggressively. In a recent confrontation, my husband stood up for me, asserting that his mother's behavior amounted to harassment. I supported him and asked her to respect the children's choice in how they address me. Unfortunately, this stance led to criticism from other family members, friends, and even some acquaintances who believe we should comply with my mother-in-law's wishes to maintain family harmony. Am I in the wrong for not insisting that my stepchildren call me Mom and for not agreeing with my mother-in-law's demands? I can't believe your mother-in-law is suggesting that you should force your stepchildren into a specific parental relationship dynamic. It's almost laughable how she thinks you should have adopted them immediately after marriage and changed their last names to yours. The sarcasm aside, your approach is truly commendable. The way your stepchildren address you doesn't diminish the wonderful relationship you've built with them. I wonder if your mother-in-law's reaction stems from a fear that your lack of insistence on the title means you aren't attached to the kids. However, it's crucial to understand that the children's opinions matter most. If they want to call you Mom, eventually they will, and if not, that's perfectly fine. By not pressuring them while offering unconditional love, you're doing the best thing for your relationship. You aren't their biological mother, so pushing them to address you a certain way isn't your place. The kids should have the freedom to express their preferences within the boundaries set by you and their father. If they choose to call you Mom, it should be their decision. If they prefer using your first name, that should be respected too. Frankly, it's quite odd for your mother-in-law to get so worked up about this, especially after a decade into the marriage. I wonder if there might be something else going on with her health or emotions. Regardless, you're definitely not in the wrong here. I'm 26 years old, and I'm pregnant with my first child. My husband, Harry, and I are thrilled about it. We recently announced our pregnancy during a family party. Most people were excited for us, except for my sister-in-law, Jonah. She's 34 years old and happens to be best friends with my husband's ex-wife, Elisa. Elisa and Harry had a short-lived marriage in their early 20s, and it ended due to her infidelity. I met Harry almost 3 years after his divorce, and we hit it off instantly. We're now happily married and expecting our first child. However, Joanna believes that I somehow stole her brother away from Elisa and that Harry still has feelings for his ex. Joanna frequently brings up Elisa in conversations with me, usually when Harry isn't around. While it was initially a minor annoyance, her comments escalated after I announced my pregnancy. She started suggesting that I should name our baby Elisa if it's a girl, which really bothered me. One evening, at a party celebrating Joanna and Theo's 5th wedding anniversary, she mentioned the Elisa name suggestion again. I lost my patience and publicly revealed something no one else knew. I loudly responded to Joanna, asking her if she wanted me to name my child after her high school sweetheart, Marcus, like she named her own son. Everyone at the party was shocked, including her husband Theo, who looked stunned. I felt bad about hurting him, but I couldn't tolerate Joanna anymore. Harry and I left the party immediately without waiting to see the aftermath. I felt awful afterward, especially when Harry supported me, as he felt I did the right thing. However, his mother called and criticized me for my outburst, saying that I should apologize to Joanna and claim it was a joke. I was already upset with Joanna's comments, and Harry's mother's call made things worse. I declined to apologize and told her to pay attention to what her daughter says to others instead. She also called Harry, and they argued about the situation. She insisted she wouldn't see Harry unless we apologized to Joanna and Theo. Harry is firm about not apologizing, and I feel terrible because I know how much he values his family, and now they're not speaking to him because of what I said. I might have overreacted a little, and maybe I should just apologize and get this over with before it goes any further. What if Theo leaves Joanna? Did I ruin their marriage? Should I apologize, or am I right here? I really don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't want to see Harry upset, but I also don't think Joanna deserves my apology. Am I the a-hole here? They're getting a divorce now. Apparently, since I refused to back down from what I said, Joanna had to come clean about what had happened, as Theo wouldn't drop it. Harry's mother called us to let us know that this was all our fault and that we had ruined Joanna's life. I'm not sure how it's my fault, since I was not the one who named her son after her high school ex. But sure, whatever. I'd suggest we just apologize, but Harry said that he would rather not speak to his mother and sister than apologize for doing the right thing. Gosh, I really couldn't have asked for a better husband. I do feel bad that he's giving up contact with his family for my sake, but I'm glad that he's on the right side of things. It's been a few days since Theo decided to leave Joanna, and she's been calling us nonstop, mostly Harry, saying that he needs to leave me, and that I'm going to ruin his life. She even went to the extent of saying that Elisa is still willing to take him back, and that she'll make sure that we're never happy together if he decides to stay with me. At this point, we've decided to go no contact with them. I've already blocked her and her mother from all my social media accounts, and Harry's doing the same. He doesn't even look upset anymore, just outraged that his mother and sister are being this crazy and awful. I know there hasn't been an update for really long, but that's because of all the craziness that we've had to deal with over the past few weeks. So to fill you guys in real quick, Theo decided to file for divorce and seek full custody of their son. He moved out within a few days of their marriage anniversary and has been living with one of his friends. We've managed to keep in touch, and I even apologized to him for whatever happened. But he ended up thanking me for bringing up the truth. Apparently, he'd always suspected that the name Marcus had meant something to her since she had gone ballistic when he dared to even suggest another name and even threatened to leave him over this. That's why he had no option but to let her name their son Marcus. But now,
So much is currently unfolding in my life, and I'm eager to gather some insights from fellow Redditors. I'm a 31-year-old woman with a rather peculiar relationship with my sister Becky, who is 28, not her real name, of course. Becca was born prematurely and spent several weeks in the ICU before coming home. This early experience led our parents to spoil her mercilessly. Becky grew up with everything handed to her on a silver platter, while my younger brother Sam, who is 25, and I had to accept whatever our parents deemed best for us. We often heard variations of, "You're the older sister. You need to be responsible for your poor sister." Don't be a selfish brat. You need to learn to share things with your siblings. Becky consistently received whatever she desired almost instantly, whether it was her birthday parties or when we had to step aside at our own birthday celebrations so she could blow out the candles on our cakes. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I could write a whole novel about the favoritism we experienced at the hands of our parents. Strangely, I had accepted this treatment as normal and believed that Becky deserved all the nice things. However, everything changed when I was 20 and caught her in the act with my then-boyfriend on my bed. There was a lot of screaming and yelling from both sides, and I couldn't believe my baby sister had betrayed me in this manner. In the midst of the argument, Becky claimed to have a panic attack, which led my parents to swoop in and take her side, chastising me for not being mature and understanding about my poor sister's delicate state. It was at that moment that I realized my parents would always prioritize Becky above everything else. The following week, I moved out and stayed with my childhood friend, now fiancé, David, who is also 31. I tried to reach out to my parents for reconciliation after moving out, but it resulted in a heated argument. They refused to see my perspective and even denied that Becky had faked her attack. I thought this betrayal was the worst, but I was soon proven wrong. Becky started visiting my part-time job as a cashier, flaunting her relationship with my ex and deliberately making out with him in front of me. She paid no attention to the stink eyes and icy glares directed at them. She even went so far as to spread rumors that I had slept with TAs and lecturers for better grades, although my friends quickly dispelled these lies. All of these events left me increasingly depressed. I wouldn't have made it through college if it weren't for David and my friends, whom I consider myself undeserving of. 2 years ago, my father's sudden death prompted me to reach out to my mother, with whom I had been estranged since the incident with Becky. My mother seemed apologetic about the entire affair, and I felt confident enough to let her back into my life. During our reconciliation, I made it clear that Becky was not to be mentioned in my presence, nor was she to be a part of my life. My mother appeared to accept this. For the past year, I've been diligently planning my wedding, set to take place next month. However, last week, my mother invited me to her home under the guise of discussing wedding arrangements. When I arrived, I was greeted not only by my mother, but also by my aunts. The conversation about wedding arrangements initially started on a positive note, but took an unexpected turn towards my sister's attendance at the wedding. Needless to say, I firmly refused to invite her. Right on cue, my mother's tears began to flow, pleading with me in desperation. I felt frustrated by her attempt to corner me, especially with the support of my aunts. I walked away from the chaotic scene, my mother chasing after me, shouting something about family values. Feeling exasperated, I discussed the entire situation with David, my brother, my in-laws, and my best friend. Going over all the details only reinforced the fact that my mother would always prioritize Becky, disregarding my emotions and feelings. Finally, yesterday, I decided to make one last call to my mother to inform her that her invitation had been revoked. Shortly after the call, my phone started ringing incessantly. Relatives called to label me as ungrateful and childish, questioning my actions. To those who inquired about my relationship with my brother, he had remained in touch with me throughout and distanced himself from our parents once he turned 18, the fallout with my sister being the last straw. Now, onto the actual update. As many of you speculated, my mother had twisted the story to her advantage, painting it as a fight over a guy that led to me storming out of the house. These lies crumbled when one of my aunts called my brother, criticizing him for supporting me. He set the record straight by narrating the entire ordeal, leaving a pin-drop silence on the other end. Moreover, he shared screenshots of some message exchanges between him and Becky during their fallout, clarifying the situation. My mother faced severe backlash from multiple family members for her deceit, and most of them are now on my side. Despite this, she still has a few supporters, but they have been blocked from communicating with my brother and me. What should have been a joyous time in my life has turned into a chaotic spectacle. I can only hope that this will be the final update. Interestingly, today took an unexpected turn when I spotted my mother's car near my home. As I approached, my best friend decided to talk to her and convince her to stay away from me. As I sat hidden in my car, away from my mother's sight, My best friend approached her. It felt like an eternity, but after about 45 minutes, she messaged me that it was safe to come inside. Once settled in the house, my friend recounted her conversation with my mother. It appeared that my sister had faced some difficult situations in college due to her arrogant demeanor. The most significant of these was my ex cheating on her with another girl, leaving her heartbroken and with an STD. The news of her contracting the STD quickly spread among her friends and acquaintances, leading to resentment and hostility from many. Feeling alienated, Becky transferred to a new college far from home. She sought counseling there, which wasn't an option before, given my parents' resistance to the idea. According to my mother, Becky had cut off contact with her after our father's death. She seemed remorseful for her past actions. When the topic of my marriage arose, my mother devised a plan to invite her to force a reconciliation. However, my refusal to invite her thwarted these plans, preventing her favorite child from reuniting with her. My friend made it clear that the decision of who to invite was entirely mine and firmly warned my mother that any attempt to approach me would result in exposure on social media for the world to witness. I find myself torn about the entire situation. While I am certain that I don't want either of them at my wedding, I can't help but feel some sympathy for my sister, considering the challenges she faced. Yet, these emotions are overshadowed by the memories of her deliberate attempts to hurt me. I once adored her as my sweet little sister, hoping she would change. However, the day I learned about the rumors she spread, I was utterly crushed and inconsolable. It was David who encouraged me to seek counseling and later therapy. Without his and my friends' unwavering support, I might have been an emotional wreck. I sincerely hope that Becky can work on her issues with her therapist and undergo a transformation, becoming a better person in the process, perhaps in the future. I am open to the possibility of reconciling with my sister, but at this moment, I am far from ready to meet her. As many of you suggested, we had a meeting scheduled with the vendors and the wedding planner. We've taken steps to ensure security during the wedding and the reception. You've made the right decision by not giving in to your mother's demands. She clearly attempted to manipulate the situation in her favor, putting you in a difficult spot in front of your aunts. It might be helpful to check out the subreddit r/raised narcissists. To address another issue, I really enjoy wearing scarves in my hair. However, my boyfriend isn't the type to give gifts. It was surprising when he unexpectedly showed up at my place with a scarf. Although it had some stains, it was beautiful. I washed it, and it quickly became my favorite. A few days later, when I went to his parents' place to discuss our wedding, his sister became fixated on the scarf. Suddenly, she approached me and tried to pull it off, accusing me of stealing it from her. I was shocked and confused, explaining that my boyfriend had given it to me, but she wouldn't listen, calling me a liar and even mentioning old nail polish stains on it that she had dropped. I took off the scarf, threw it at her, and left before my boyfriend joined us. When he later asked where I was, I told him I had gone home. When he returned, we had a major argument. In the original post, I didn't provide some necessary information. He confessed that the scarf had belonged to his mom, who had given it to his sister years ago. She hadn't even worn it, and he found it in the storeroom, thinking of giving it to me instead of it going to waste. Now, I think it's important for your boyfriend to understand that if he wants to give you a gift, he should buy it rather than taking something without permission. Technically, you unknowingly received stolen property due to his actions. While the scarf might not hold significant monetary value, the situation left you feeling utterly humiliated. This happened to me, but with a necklace. X gave me a lovely necklace, and I wore it. Some friends saw it and said it looked like the one she had. We checked, and it turned out to be hers. The catch on the chain was slightly loose, just as she described. After examining it further, there was no doubt it was her necklace. The person who had given it to me had borrowed it from her a week prior, and he had then given it to me. We were both incredibly angry. He became an ex, and thankfully, she got her property back. Your sister-in-law could have discussed this with you before accusing you outright. Most people don't wear stolen items in front of their owners, and there could have been another explanation, especially if you hadn't been in her room or had no access to her belongings. Her reaction was over the top, and she was clearly angry. However, your soon-to-be ex-boyfriend put you both in a terrible situation. He stole from her, gave it to you, and let you walk around wearing the scarf without ever mentioning where he got it. That's messed up. He's either oblivious to how bad it looks, or he's calculating. You should seriously reconsider being with someone like that. You deserve better than a stolen, stained scarf. I'm a 16-year-old male with an older sister who is 20. She moved out for university 2 years ago, and our relationship was fine until about a month ago when she suddenly went no contact with us. Some background information is important here. Her relationship with our parents has always been messy, with frequent arguments and drama. She saw me as someone she could trust and shared things about our parents with me. Our parents insisted on the importance of education and made it clear that dropping out or getting low marks was a shame on them. They would frequently argue with each other and involve me in their arguments, not hesitating to bring up each other's past. They argued about everything from cheating to paying for her tuition and rent, among other things. Returning to the main topic, her 20th birthday was approaching, and we wanted to pay her a surprise visit. The problem was that we didn't know her address. She had moved to a new apartment, which sparked a major argument between my mom and dad. My mom blamed my dad for not taking her and dropping her off when she moved. This argument initiated everything. In summary, we tried to contact her through calls and emails, but my dad ended up going to the police to investigate, which led to finding out that she had dropped out and was in hiding. She had told me more about it, as she trusted me more than our parents. This is where I might have made a mistake. Later, while my parents and I were in the living room, they began arguing, and one of the main points was the fact that my sister had left us without notice. They were discussing possible reasons for her actions at this point. I was absolutely furious with my parents for their delusional behavior, so I blurted out something along the lines of, "Yeah, you guys scared her. You pressured her and created damn scenarios in her head. No wonder she doesn't like you. Who's your next target, me?" The next thing I knew, I was in a heated argument with my parents. They kept telling me to mind my own business and not interfere in other people's lives. It was like my sister's situation all over again. I couldn't take it anymore, so I told them to go to hell, stormed up to my room, and adopted the classic rebellious teenage demeanor. My 39-year-old uncle found out about the situation, and I explained everything to him. He supported me, further infuriating my parents. They accused me of ruining them, as if they couldn't care less, and refused to reflect on their own actions that led to this mess. Am I the one at fault here? Here's some unsolicited advice that might help, although it may not directly apply to your situation. I grew up in a similar environment. My parents would drunkenly tear each other apart almost every night. Sometimes I'd intervene to stop them. Other times I'd shout from the stairs, but nothing worked. At 18, before leaving for university, I confronted my dad and asked how long he thought they'd last. He didn't have an answer. What I didn't realize then was the deep psychological damage witnessing this had caused me. Faced with intimacy, I'd shut down entirely. Looking back, it was a flight or fight response. While I matured emotionally in some ways, my growth was stunted, especially in relationships. I never received therapy, and I regret not considering it. I managed to work through it on my own, but therapy would have been incredibly helpful. If possible, talking to someone about your experiences could be beneficial. Good luck. Well, look at the consequences of their actions. I'm sorry, OP, I'm not sure of a solution. Technically, you're stuck with them for a bit longer, depending on your situation. Perhaps you can consider living with your uncle if that's an option. I don't have specific advice for your situation, but I don't blame you for speaking your mind and telling them the truth.